when my stepmother slapped me across the face the moment she saw the $25 million signature she thought belonged only to me. I did not shed a tear. I only thought one thing. If she had not struck me, she might have actually taken everything, but she did not know the terrifying truth hidden in that document. The money was never mine alone. My name is Amy Walsh, and the first thing I realized when consciousness clawed its way back into my brain was that the world had dissolved into a violent, rhythmic strobing of red and blue. The lights did not just flash, they assaulted me. They swept across my eyelids, heavy and sticky with something that smelled like wet iron, forcing me to acknowledge that I was no longer in my father's pristine backyard. I was strapped to a gurney, the vibration of the road humming through my spine, the siren wailing like a dying animal directly above my head. A face hovered over mine. It was a man, young, with kind eyes that looked too tired for whatever time of night it was. He was saying something, his lips moving in sync with the throbbing pain in my temple, but the sound was underwater. I tried to blink, but the motion sent a fresh spike of agony drilling behind my left eye. "Can you hear me?" the paramedic asked, his voice finally breaking through the static. "Amy, can you hear me?" I tried to nod, but my neck felt fused. Instead, I managed a dry, cracking sound that might have been a yes. "Okay, that is good," he said, his hands moving efficiently, checking the IV line that snaked into my arm. "You took a nasty fall, Amy. You lost a fair amount of blood. We are taking you to St. Mary's. I need you to stay with me. Do not close your eyes." A fall. The word floated in the sterile air of the ambulance, absurd and heavy. A fall implied an accident. A fall implied gravity was the only culprit. I wanted to laugh, but my jaw ached too much. It felt unhinged, or at least bruised down to the bone. "Amy," the paramedic said again, his voice firmer this time. He leaned closer, shining a penlight into my eyes, blinding me for a second. "I need to know what happened. The police officer riding up front needs to know. Did you fall, or did someone hit you?" The question hung there, suspended between the wail of the siren and the rattle of the medical equipment. Did someone hit me? My memory did not play back like a movie. It came in jagged shards, sharp and dangerous. Cutting through the fog of my concussion, I saw the glint of the setting sun hitting the crystal champagne flutes. I smelled the cloying scent of gardenias and expensive catering. I felt the heavy, humid air of a perfect summer evening, the kind my stepmother, Vanessa, lived for. It was her stage, her kingdom, and then the image shifted. I saw the heavy glass table, the centerpiece of the patio. I saw her face. It was not the face she showed the neighbors or the church committee. It was a mask of pure, distilled avarice. Her lips were pulled back from her teeth, her eyes wide and manic, fixed on the blue folder in my hands. "Give it to me!" The scream echoed in my head, louder than the siren. I blinked, and the ambulance ceiling came back into focus. The paramedic was still waiting. "Because of a signature," I whispered. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. "Say that again," he asked, leaning his ear close to my mouth. "It was because of a signature," I said, each syllable costing me energy I did not have. "Who did this, Amy?" The image returned, violent and absolute. I saw the folder flying from my grip. I saw her hand, manicured and heavy with diamond rings, swinging through the air. The impact had not been a slap. It had been a bludgeoning. The force had thrown me backward. I remembered the feeling of weightlessness for a fraction of a second before my spine collided with the edge of the glass table. The sound of the glass shattering had been deafening. It sounded like a gunshot. Then, gravity took over, and I was on the flagstones, the world tilting sideways, warm liquid pouring down my forehead, blinding me. "Amy?" I looked at the paramedic. I needed him to hear this. I needed to say it aloud to make it real, to stop the gaslighting before it could even begin. I knew Vanessa. By now, she would already be spinning the story. She would be weeping into a silk handkerchief. telling the guests how clumsy I was, how unstable I had been lately. She would be painting over the blood with her lies. "My stepmother," I rasped, forcing the air from my lungs. "My stepmother did it." The paramedic stiffened. He exchanged a look with someone I could not see, probably the driver or the officer. He wrote something down on his clipboard, the pen scratching loudly against the paper. "Okay," he said, his tone shifting from medical professional to something more protective. "We have got it noted. You are safe now. Amy, she is not here." But she was here. She was in the throbbing of my head. She was in the fear that tasted like bile in my throat. I closed my eyes, defying his orders, and the scene played out again. It had been 20 minutes ago, maybe 30. Time was slippery. The party was in full swing. Vanessa had organized it to celebrate my stepbrother Logan's acceptance into a university he had barely qualified for. The yard was filled with the elite of our suburb: lawyers, doctors, local politicians. My father, Mark, was holding court by the grill, laughing at a joke he probably did not understand, a beer in his hand, looking every bit the happy patriarch. Vanessa had called me into the sunroom. "Just to help organize the gifts," she had said, her voice dripping with that public sweetness that made my skin crawl. But there were no gifts in the sunroom, just the blue folder, the folder that had arrived by courier that morning, addressed only to me, the folder I had hidden, but not well enough. She had found it. When I walked in, she had already broken the seal. She was reading the summary page, her hands trembling, not with fear, but with greed. $25 million, she had whispered, the number rolling off her tongue like a prayer. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, she actually saw me. She did not see the inconvenient stepdaughter or the unpaid maid. She saw a vault she needed to crack. "Your grandfather left you $25 million. "It is mine, Vanessa," I had said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Grandpa Walter left it to me." "You act like you deserve it," she had spat, closing the distance between us. "You ungrateful little leech. We fed you, we clothed you, and you hide this? You hide $25 million from your family?" "It is not family money," I had told her, stepping back until my heels hit the sliding glass door. "It is a trust. Grandpa knew you would try to take it." That was when she snapped. The sheer entitlement radiating off her was heat-waver hot. She lunged. I tried to dodge, but she was faster, fueled by a rage that had been simmering for years. She grabbed the folder. I held on. "Let go," she shrieked. "No." And then the blow, the impact, the glass table exploding under my weight. I remembered lying on the patio stones, stunned, unable to move. I remembered the guests rushing over, the gasps, the screams, but mostly, I remembered my father. Mark Hart, my dad. He had stood there, holding his grilling tongs, staring down at me. He saw the blood pooling around my head. He saw his wife standing over me, chest heaving, the folder clutched in her hand like a trophy. He did not rush to me. He did not tackle her. He did not scream for a doctor. He looked at Vanessa. He looked at the guests, and I saw the panic in his eyes. Not for my life, but for the scene, for the reputation, for the disruption of his perfect Saturday afternoon. He stood immobilized by his own cowardice. "Amy fell," Vanessa had shouted to the horrified crowd, her voice pitching up into hysteria. "Oh my God, she just tripped. Someone call 911. Lying there, bleeding out, I had realized the truth. I was alone. I had always been alone in that house. The ambulance hit a pothole, jolting me back to the present. A fresh wave of nausea rolled over me. "We are 5 minutes out," the paramedic said, checking my vitals again. "Blood pressure is stabilizing. You are doing great. Amy?" I stared at the ceiling of the ambulance. My hand felt heavy. I looked down and saw the plastic hospital bracelet they had already snapped onto my wrist. Doe. Jane, it read. Or maybe it had my name now. I could not focus on the letters. but I focused on the feeling of the plastic against my skin. It was tight. It was real. In that house, I was a ghost. I was the background noise to Logan's success and Vanessa's social climbing. I was the invisible labor that kept the floors clean and the laundry done. But here, in this ambulance, with a bracelet tagging me, I was a tangible entity. This piece of plastic acknowledged my existence more than my father ever had. It acknowledged that I was a person who could be hurt, who could bleed, who had a name. And I had something else. My mind drifted back to the document Vanessa had been so desperate to seize. She had seen the number. $25 million. She had seen my grandfather's signature, shaky but determined, at the bottom of the page. She thought that signature was the key to her future. She thought if she bullied me, beat me, or gaslit me enough, she could force my hand and transfer that power to her. But she had not read the whole thing. She had stopped at the dollar sign. She was too blinded by the zeros to read the fine print in the paragraph below the valuation. I remembered the email from my grandfather's lawyer. Mr. Marion. I had memorized it the night before, huddled under my covers with my phone brightness turned all the way down. Dear Miss Walsh, the trust is active immediately upon confirmation of your grandfather's passing. However, you must understand the complexity of the structure. The funds are not solely for your benefit. You are the primary trustee, yes, but the beneficiary clause is split. This trust is not yours alone. It is a shield, and it is a weapon, but it requires 2 keys to turn. Vanessa did not know. She thought she had beaten a $25 million check out of a helpless girl. She did not know she had just declared war on a fortress she could not enter. Not mine alone, I whispered to the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. What was that? The paramedic asked, adjusting the blanket over my shoulders. Nothing, I said. Just thinking. I thought about the other name in the file, a name I had never heard spoken in the Hart household, a name that was buried under decades of secrets and shame, a name that, if revealed, would do more damage to Vanessa's carefully curated reputation than any assault charge ever could. My grandfather knew. He had known everything. He had watched from his quiet house in the suburbs, noting every slight, every insult, every time Vanessa pushed me aside to shine a light on her precious son, Logan. He had seen my father's spine crumble year after year. The signature on that document was not a gift. It was a judgment. The ambulance began to slow down, the siren changing pitch as we navigated what I assumed was the hospital driveway. The turns became sharper. I could feel the momentum shifting. We are here, the paramedic said. Trauma team is waiting. You are going to be fine, Amy. Fine. I would be stitched up. I would have a scar. I would have a concussion. But fine was a relative term. If I went back to that house, I would die. Maybe not immediately, but slowly. They would drain me. They would use this injury to paint me as unstable, unfit to manage my own affairs. They would try to take conservatorship. Vanessa would bring in her own lawyers. Mark would nod and sign whatever she put in front of him. I gripped the edge of the sheet with my uninjured hand. The fabric was rough, industrial. It felt like armor. I could not go back to being the ghost. The back doors of the ambulance flew open, and the humid night air rushed in, mixed with the smell of exhaust and antiseptic. Voices shouted commands. Strong hands lifted the gurney. The world became a blur of fluorescent lights and ceiling tiles rushing past as they wheeled me into the emergency room. Trauma 2. We have a 20-year-old female, blunt force trauma to the head, lacerations from glass, possible concussion. Someone shouted. I looked up at the ceiling tiles whizzing by. 1, 2, 3, 4. Vanessa thought she had won tonight. She thought she had put me in my place. She thought violence was the ultimate authority. She was wrong. Pain sharpened my mind. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, hard clarity that settled in the pit of my stomach like a stone. If I survived this night, if I made it off this gurney and out of this hospital, the Amy Walsh they knew was dead. The quiet girl who did the dishes and apologized for taking up space was gone. She died on the patio stones when her head hit the glass. The person waking up in her place was different. I had $25 million behind me, yes, but I also had the truth. I knew who the second beneficiary was. I knew why Grandpa Walter had structured the money the way he did. And I knew exactly what Vanessa was terrified of losing. People think my grandfather's signature made me an heir. Nobody knows it made me a threat. To understand why the signature meant so much, you have to understand the silence that came before it. My life did not end when my mother died of cancer when I was 12, but my visibility did, when I moved into my father's house in the affluent suburbs of Connecticut. I ceased to be a protagonist in my own story. I became a background extra, a prop used to flesh out the set design of the perfect life Vanessa Hart had curated for herself. Vanessa was not the wicked stepmother of fairy tales. She did not lock me in a tower or feed me poisoned apples. Her cruelty was far more modern and far more insidious. It was the cruelty of erasure. Vanessa was a woman of beige cashmere and white orchids, of surfaces that gleamed and schedules that ran with military precision. She was beautiful in a sharp, angular way, like a piece of glass that catches the light just right, but would cut you if you held it too tight. She had a son, Logan Pierce. Logan was 2 years older than me, a boy who seemed to have been born with a golden spotlight tracking his every movement. He was loud, charismatic, and athletic, everything my father, Mark, had always wanted to be but never was. From the day I arrived with my 2 suitcases of worn clothes and my box of books, it was made clear to me, without a single word being spoken, that Logan was the sun around which this household orbited. I was merely a satellite, tolerated as long as I did not disrupt the gravity. The erasure started with the small things. I remember the first dinner I had with them. The table was set with heavy ceramic plates and crystal glasses. Vanessa spent 20 minutes asking Logan about his lacrosse practice, hanging on his every grunt and monosyllabic answer as if he were reciting poetry. My father chimed in, his face glowing with pride, asking about the coach, the team stats, the upcoming game against their rivals. When the conversation finally lulled, my father looked at me. For a second, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "So, Amy," he said, his voice too loud, too cheerful, "how was your first day at the new school?" Before I could answer, before I could tell them that I had eaten lunch alone in the library because the cafeteria noise was too overwhelming, Vanessa reached across the table to wipe a speck of sauce from Logan's chin. "Oh, Mark, do not pester her," Vanessa said, her voice smooth like warm honey. "She is adjusting. Let us not put her on the spot. Logan, tell us about the scout coming on Friday." And just like that, the spotlight swung back. I closed my mouth. I learned very quickly that my voice was considered an interruption. Over the next 4 years, the dynamic hardened into concrete. I was not abused in the way people think of abuse. I was fed. I had a room, though it was the guest room down the hall, decorated in impersonal shades of gray that made me feel like a visitor who had overstayed her welcome. But the emotional landscape of the house was a desert, and I was dying of thirst. I became the default help. It was never explicitly stated that I was the maid, but the expectations were woven into the fabric of our daily lives. If Logan left his muddy cleats in the hallway, Vanessa would sigh and say, "Amy, could you grab those? Someone might trip." If the dishwasher needed unloading, it was, "Amy, you are right there, sweetie." If the lawn needed raking, Mark would suggest it would be good exercise for me, while Logan was inside playing video games because he needed to rest his legs for the big game. My father saw what he wanted to see. He saw a harmonious, blended family. He saw a wife who had graciously taken in a motherless child. He did not see that his daughter had become a ghost in her own home. "Vanessa tries so hard," he would tell me when we were alone in the car, usually when he was driving me to run an errand for her. "It is not easy for her, taking on a teenager. You should be more grateful. Amy, make an effort to smile more." So I smiled. I smiled while I folded Logan's laundry. I smiled while I scrubbed the pans that Vanessa used to make elaborate dinners that she barely ate. I smiled while they planned vacations to ski resorts, where I spent the days in the lodge reading because they forgot to book lessons for me, and it was too late to add another person to the package. My academic achievements were treated as inconveniences. In my junior year, I brought home a report card with straight A's. I was ranked third in my class. I remember placing it on the kitchen island, right next to the granite fruit bowl, hoping it would be seen. When Vanessa came home, she placed her keys right on top of it. Later, when I moved the keys and showed it to my father, he patted my shoulder. "That is nice, honey. Smart girl. Hey, did you hear Logan made varsity captain? We are going to order pizza to celebrate." That night, we celebrated Logan's captaincy. My report card ended up in the recycling bin, buried under the pizza boxes. Logan was not overtly cruel to me, at least not at first. He just absorbed the entitlement that Vanessa fed him. He learned that I was a resource to be used. "Amy, have you seen my gray hoodie?" he would yell from upstairs. "Amy, can you proofread my history essay? I suck at commas." "Amy, tell Mom I am at the library," he would whisper as he snuck out the back door to go to a party. I did it all. I found the hoodie, I fixed the commas, I lied to Vanessa. I did it because it was the only currency I had. If I was useful, I was safe. If I was useful, they would keep me. But inside, I was building a fortress. I started writing. It began as a way to scream without making a sound. I bought a cheap composition notebook from the drugstore with money I found in the couch cushions, and I wrote everything down. I wrote about the way Vanessa looked at me when she thought no one was watching. A look of pure, unfiltered annoyance, like I was a stain on her expensive rug that she could not scrub out. I wrote about the way my father shrank in her presence, how his voice went up an octave when he was trying to placate her. I wrote about Logan's emptiness, how he was a hollow vessel filled with their expectations. I kept the notebook hidden under a loose floorboard in my closet. It was the only thing in that house that was truly mine. The breaking point, the moment I realized that my neglect was not just accidental, but systemic, happened in the spring of my 16th year. I had found a summer writing program at the State University. It was prestigious, intensive, and for the first time, I felt a spark of genuine hope. It required a submission of a short story and a letter of recommendation. I got in. The acceptance letter said I had a rare and piercing voice. I was ecstatic. I waited for the right moment to bring it up. It was a Tuesday night. We were eating grilled salmon. Vanessa was in a good mood because she had lost 3 pounds. "Dad, Vanessa," I started, my hands shaking under the table. "I got into the summer writing workshop at the university. It is a really big deal. They only take 20 students from the whole state." My father looked up, chewing slowly. "Writing? That sounds nice, Amy." "It is a 2-week program," I said, rushing to get the details out. "I would stay in the dorms. It costs $300 for the tuition and board." The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. Vanessa set her fork down. She dabbed the corners of her mouth with a linen napkin. She did not look at me. She looked at Mark. $300, she repeated, as if I had asked for a trip to the moon. "It is not that much," I said, my voice shrinking. "I can do extra chores. I can—" "It is not about the money, Amy," Vanessa said, turning her gaze on me. It was a cold, flat look. "It is about priorities. We have a lot of expenses coming up. The roof needs repairs, and Logan has that travel tournament in Florida." "The tournament is in July," I said. "This is June." "Equipment is expensive," Logan chimed in, his mouth full of salmon. "My new pads alone were like $500. I looked at my father. I begged him with my eyes to step in. $300. He spent that much on golf fees in a weekend. "Mark," Vanessa said softly. It was a warning. My father cleared his throat. He looked at his plate. "Amy, honey, maybe next year. Things are a little tight right now. We have to be fair to everyone." Fair. The word hung in the air. Toxic and absurd. "But Logan just got $500 worth of pads," I said, my voice trembling. I never ask for anything. Do not count other people's money, Amy, Vanessa snapped, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. It is unbecoming. Logan has a future in athletics. It is an investment. This writing thing, it is a hobby. We cannot throw money away on hobbies when we have real obligations. A hobby, my soul, my lifeline. My only talent was a hobby. Logan's game, involving chasing a ball with a stick, was an investment. Okay, I said. I did not cry. I had learned long ago that tears only gave Vanessa satisfaction. Okay. I declined the acceptance the next day. I told the admissions officer that I had family obligations. That summer, while Logan went to Florida and stayed in a beachfront hotel with his team, I stayed home and painted the deck because Vanessa said the peeling paint was an eyesore. I spent hours in the blistering sun, scraping and sanding, inhaling dust, while Vanessa watched from the air-conditioned kitchen, sipping iced tea. The neighbors would walk by and wave. "Such a good helper," Mrs. Gable from next door called out one afternoon. "You are lucky to have her, Vanessa." "I know," Vanessa called back, flashing her dazzling, perfect smile. "She loves to stay busy. We cannot get her to sit down." I looked down at my hands, blistered and raw, holding the sandpaper. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk over to the fence and tell Mrs. Gable that I was not a helper, I was a hostage. But I knew no one would believe me, to the outside world. I was the lucky orphan taken in by the saintly Vanessa Hart. I was fed, clothed, and housed in a mansion. What right did I have to complain? But the resentment was growing. It was a seed planted deep in my gut, watered by every dismissal, every no, every time I was told to wait, to step back, to be quiet. The climax of my invisible years came on Logan's 18th birthday. It was an extravaganza. Vanessa had hired a DJ, a caterer, and a bartender. The backyard was transformed into a nightclub. Half the high school was there. I was not a guest. I was logistics. "Amy, make sure the ice buckets are full." "Amy, the trash is overflowing." "Amy, keep an eye on the living room. We do not want anyone spilling drinks on the white sofa." By 11 o'clock at night, I was exhausted. The bass from the music was thumping against the walls of the house. Laughter drifted in from the patio. I was in the kitchen, standing over the sink, washing the delicate serving platters that the caterers were not allowed to touch. My hands were submerged in hot, greasy water. My feet throbbed. I could see through the kitchen window out into the yard. My father was standing with his arm around Logan. They were laughing. Mark handed Logan a small box. Keys to a new car. A brand new Jeep Wrangler sat in the driveway with a giant red bow on it. I watched Logan's face light up. I watched Vanessa clap her hands in delight. I watched my father beam with the pride of a man who had provided everything his son could desire. I looked down at the suds on my arms. I was 18 too. My birthday had been 3 months ago. On my birthday, my father had given me a card with a $50 gift certificate to the mall. Vanessa had told me we would do a cake on the weekend, but the weekend came and went, and she got busy with her yoga retreat, and it was never mentioned again. I stood there, gripping the edge of the porcelain sink until my knuckles turned white. The sounds of the party, the joy, the celebration, the abundance, felt like a physical assault. I was not part of this family. I was an employee who did not get paid. I was a prop that breathed. "What am I doing?" I whispered to the empty kitchen. "What is the point of me?" I looked at the reflection in the dark window. A girl with tired eyes and messy hair, holding a dirty platter. If I disappeared tomorrow, they would not miss me. They would only miss the fact that the dishes were not done. They would miss the convenience of me, not the essence of me. I dried my hands on a towel. I went upstairs to my room, avoiding the guests who were stumbling through the hallway looking for the bathroom. I closed my door and locked it. I pulled out my notebook. I wrote down the date, and then I wrote a promise to myself. I will not live like this forever. I will not be the background character in their movie. Someday, I will have something that is mine, only mine, and when I do, I will never let them touch it. I did not know then how soon that chance would come. I did not know that across town, in a small, cluttered house filled with old books and the smell of pipe tobacco, my grandfather Walter was dying, and I did not know it. He had been watching, too. He had seen the missed birthdays. He had seen the denied writing class. He had seen the chores and the neglect. While I was washing dishes at Logan's party, thinking I was invisible, Walter was finalizing a document that would turn a spotlight on me so bright it would blind them all. But in that moment, standing in the dark, I felt only the crushing weight of my own insignificance. I went to sleep to the sound of Logan revving the engine of his new car, the sound of a future that was being handed to him on a silver platter, while I had to scrub the platter clean. The sanctuary of my teenage years smelled of old paper, vanilla dust, and the peppermint tea that Mrs. Calloway brewed every afternoon at 3 o'clock. At 16, I secured a job at Harbor Light Books, a small, cramped, wonderful independent bookstore in the town square. It was the first place I had ever stepped into where the air did not feel pressurized. At home, every room felt like a stage where I was waiting for a cue to serve or disappear, but at Harbor Light, among the towering stacks of biographies and thrillers, I was just Amy. Mrs. Calloway, the owner, was a woman in her 60s with wild gray hair and ink-stained fingers. She did not treat me like a child, and she certainly did not treat me like a servant. She asked my opinion on the window displays. She let me curate the staff picks shelf. When I restocked the heavy hardcovers, she would rush over and say, "Let me help you with that, dear. That is too heavy for one person." The first time she said that, I froze. I was so used to carrying the physical and emotional weight of the Hart household that the offer of help felt foreign, almost suspicious, but Mrs. Calloway meant it. She paid me minimum wage, which at the time was not much, but when she handed me my first paycheck, it felt like she was handing me the keys to a kingdom. $142. I held the check in my hands, staring at my name printed on the line, Amy Walsh. It was proof that my time had value. It was proof that I could exist outside the ecosystem of Vanessa and Mark Hart. I immediately went to the bank, not the fancy one my father used, but a small local branch, and opened a savings account. I deposited every cent. I had a plan. If I saved every paycheck for 2 years, I would have enough to put a deposit on an apartment the day I turned 18. I would have enough to buy a bus ticket. I would have enough to breathe. But in the Hart household, nothing remained yours for long. The encroachment began slowly, disguised as familial necessity. It started about 2 months after I began working. I was in the kitchen, making a sandwich before my shift, when Vanessa breezed in. She was wearing a tennis outfit that cost more than I would make in 6 months, but she had a furrowed brow, the universal signal for, "I am stressed, manage my emotions for me." "Amy," she said, opening the fridge and staring blankly into it. "Do you have any cash on you? The gardener is here, and I completely forgot to stop at the ATM. I need $40. I hesitated. I had $40 in my wallet, my tips from the week. I think so," I said. "Oh, wonderful," she said, turning that high-wattage smile on me. "You are a lifesaver. I will pay you back as soon as your father gets home." I gave her the money. She did not pay me back when my father got home. She did not pay me back the next day, when I gathered the courage to ask her about it a week later. She looked at me with genuine confusion. "Oh, Amy, honestly," she laughed, waving her hand dismissively. "It is $40. I picked up that shampoo you like yesterday. Didn't I? Let us just call it even. We are family. We do not keep score." The shampoo she had picked up was the generic brand I was forced to use, not the salon brand she and Logan used, but the message was clear. My money was family money. Her money was her money. It escalated from there. "Amy, since you are working now, it is only fair you contribute to your own gas money," my father said one evening, prompted by a glance from Vanessa. I was driving the 10-year-old sedan that had been my mother's, a car they graciously allowed me to use to run their errands. But I only use the car to go to work and the grocery store for you, I argued. It is part of growing up, honey, Mark said, patting my hand. You are becoming so mature. I am proud of you, taking responsibility. He used that word like a weapon, mature. Whenever I acquiesced to being exploited, I was mature. Whenever I tried to set a boundary, I was being difficult or selfish. The borrowing became frequent. Vanessa would forget her wallet when we went to pick up dry cleaning, forcing me to use my debit card. She would ask me to order pizza for dinner because she was too exhausted to cook, and when the delivery guy arrived, everyone would look at me to handle the payment. You have got it, right, Amy? Logan would say, not even looking up from his phone. You are rich now. You have a job. I am saving for college, I said once, my voice tight. Logan snorted. College? Dad is paying for college. Why are you hoarding cash? He did not know. They had not told him. Or maybe they had. And he just assumed the rules that applied to him applied to everyone. But I knew there was no college fund for me. There was a college fund for Logan. There was a retirement fund for Mark. There was a lifestyle maintenance fund for Vanessa. I was expected to figure it out. The breaking point of my naivety came 6 months into the job. I had managed to save about $800 despite the constant siphoning. I came home one day to find Vanessa sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of brochures for a lacrosse camp in California. It is an elite program, she was telling Mark. Scouts from the Ivy League schools go there. If Logan wants to play D1, he needs to be seen here. It is $3,000, Ness, Mark said, rubbing his temples. We are a little liquid light right now until the bonus comes in next quarter. Vanessa's eyes drifted to me as I walked in. It was a predatory look, assessing and cold. Amy has savings, she said. I froze. What? You have been working for months, Vanessa said, her voice taking on that reasonable, logical tone that made me want to scream. You have almost $1,000 sitting in that account doing nothing. We could borrow it, just for the deposit. We will pay you back with interest when Mark's bonus clears. No, I said. The word was out of my mouth before I could stop it. That is for my future. Your future? Logan laughed, walking into the room and grabbing a soda. Amy, I am actually going somewhere. This camp could get me a scholarship. That saves the family money in the long run. You should be grateful you can help. Grateful? I looked at them. My father, the weak man who loved peace more than justice, my stepmother, the architect of my erasure, my stepbrother, the golden calf. I am 16. Why am I paying for his camp? It is a loan, Amy, Mark said, his voice stern. He did not like conflict. He wanted me to make it easy. Do not be stingy. Your brother needs this. We help each other in this family. They wore me down. They always did. They guilted. They pressured. They made me feel small and petty. I wrote the check. They never paid me back. Mark's bonus came, and suddenly the roof needed fixing, or Vanessa needed a new car, or they decided to go on a weekend trip to reconnect. When I asked, I was told I was being obsessive about money. That was the day the Amy who wanted to be loved died, and the Amy who wanted to survive was born. I realized I could not stop them from taking what they knew about, so I had to make sure they did not know. I went to a credit union in the next town over, 3 towns away from where we lived. I opened a new account. I chose paperless statements, so nothing would ever arrive in the mail. I began a system of double-entry bookkeeping in my life. When Mrs. Pick-Calloway paid me, I would cash the check at her bank. I would take 20% of it, enough to keep up the appearance of having money for Vanessa to steal, and deposit it into the account they knew about. The rest, the real money, I hid. I kept it in the hollow rod of my closet curtain. I kept it taped inside the dust jacket of a copy of Moby Dick that I knew Logan would never open. And once a month, on my lunch break, I would drive to the credit union and deposit the cash. It was not much, $50 here, $80 there, but it was mine. It was a secret rebellion. As my senior year approached, the control tightened. I had good grades, better than Logan's, But the college conversation was very different for us. Logan was touring universities in Boston and New York. He was looking at dorms with ocean views. For me, Vanessa had a different plan. "There is really no sense in you going away, Amy," she said one night over dinner, slicing into a steak that I had cooked. "The State University has a branch 20 minutes from here. You can commute. It saves room and board." "I want to study literature," I said. "The main campus has the best program." "That is 2 hours away," Vanessa said. "Who would help with the house? Who would drive your father to the station when I have my morning Pilates? It just does not make sense to disrupt the family rhythm for literature." She said the word literature like it was a disease. "Plus," Logan added, "I am going to be away. Mom needs the help. You are basically the support staff. Amy, embrace it." Support staff. He said the quiet part out loud. They did not want me to stay because they loved me. They wanted me to stay because I was useful. I was the live-in maid, the chauffeur, the emotional punching bag. If I left, the ecosystem would collapse. Or worse, Vanessa would have to do things herself. I went to the library the next day. I did not look for literature. I looked for psychology. I found a book on domestic dynamics. I sat in the corner of the stacks, reading about financial abuse. I read about control tactics. I read about isolation. I read about how abusers limit the victim's ability to acquire resources to prevent them from leaving. My hands shook as I turned the pages. It was like reading a biography of my life. The appropriation of earnings, the sabotage of employment or education, the guilt-tripping related to spending, the family money myth where only one person controls the pot. I was not crazy. I was not selfish. I was being harvested. I closed the book and stared at the metal shelving. A cold rage settled in my chest. It was different from the sadness I had felt as a child. This was sharp. It was calculating. I went back to the bookstore that afternoon. Mrs. Calloway was unpacking a box of new releases. "Mrs. Calloway," I said, my voice steady. "I was wondering if I could pick up extra shifts, maybe on Sundays. I can open—" She looked at me, surprised. "Are you sure, Amy? Don't you want a day off?" "I like working," I lied. "I like being here." That part was true. I took every shift I could. I started doing odd jobs for the other shop owners in the square, sweeping the sidewalk for the bakery, organizing files for the florist. Every dollar I made from those side jobs went into the credit union. When Vanessa asked why I was working so much, I told her I was saving up to buy Logan a really nice graduation present. "Oh, that is so sweet of you, Amy," she said, touching my cheek. "Finally, you are thinking about someone else." She believed it because it fit her narrative. She believed it because she could not imagine a world where I was not serving them. I let her believe it. I hoarded my 10s and 20s. I wore old shoes so I would not have to spend money on new ones. I ate peanut butter sandwiches so I would not spend lunch money. I watched Logan get his acceptance letters. I watched Mark write checks for Logan's housing deposits without blinking. I watched Vanessa plan the empty nest renovation for when Logan left, a renovation that notably did not include changing my room, because in her mind, I was never leaving. They thought they had me trapped. They thought they had successfully groomed me into a permanent servant, grateful for the scraps from their table. But every time I drove to that credit union, every time I saw the balance on that secret account tick up, $500, $1,000, $2,000, I knew something they did not. They owned my labor, but they did not own all of me. And one day, I was going to buy myself back. If the house I shared with my father and stepmother was a cold, sterile museum of performative happiness, my grandfather Walter's house was a warm, cluttered fortress of reality. Walter Hart lived 40 minutes away in a town that Vanessa referred to as rustic when she was being polite and decrepit when she had had 2 glasses of wine. His home was a small, single-story bungalow with peeling yellow paint and a porch that sagged slightly to the left. Inside, it smelled of cherry pipe tobacco, old leather, and dust. The kind of dust that felt settled and comfortable, not neglected. For the last 2 years of high school, my weekends belonged to him. I told Vanessa I was going over to help the old man out, because he was getting frail. She allowed it, not out of kindness, but because it made her look like a benevolent daughter-in-law without her actually having to do any work. "Make sure he takes his pills," she would say as I walked out the door, never looking up from her magazine. "And try to see if he has updated that will of his. We need to know if the house is worth selling." I would drive my mother's old sedan down the highway, and with every mile that put distance between me and the Hart household, my chest would loosen. By the time I pulled into Walter's gravel driveway, I could breathe again. Walter was nothing like his son. My father, Mark, was soft and pliable, a man who had traded his spine for a quiet life. Walter was made of ironwood. He was 80 years old, with hands that looked like twisted roots, and eyes that were sharp, blue, and missed absolutely nothing. "There she is," he would say when I walked in, sitting in his favorite armchair surrounded by stacks of newspapers. "The only person in this family with a brain." We would spend hours just talking. It was a simple luxury that I had been starved of for so long. In my house, conversations were transactions, instructions, criticisms, or demands. With Walter, conversation was an exchange of souls. He asked me about the books I was reading. He asked me about my thoughts on the news. He listened when I spoke, actually waiting for me to finish my sentences instead of cutting in with a request for coffee. One Saturday afternoon, sitting on his porch drinking iced tea, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Vanessa. It was always Vanessa. She probably wanted to know where the dry cleaning ticket was. I flinched. It was a small, involuntary spasm, my shoulder hiking up toward my ear as if I expected a blow. I ignored the call, but my mood had shattered. Walter watched me over the rim of his glass. He set it down slowly. "You are afraid of her," he stated. It was not a question. "I am not afraid," I lied, looking at the overgrown lilacs in the yard. I do not like the conflict. She is intense." "She is a bully," Walter said, his voice low and gravelly. "And your father is a coward for letting it happen." I looked down at my hands. I could not defend them. "Amy," Walter said, leaning forward, "look at me." I looked up. "Do not mistake silence for weakness," he said. "You have been silent a long time. That does not mean you are weak. It means you are waiting, but you cannot wait forever." That was the day he told me the truth. I had always assumed Walter was just getting by on a pension. He lived simply. He drove a truck from 1995. He wore flannel shirts that had been darned at the elbows. "Come inside," he said. "I want to show you something." He led me into his study, a room lined floor to ceiling with books. He went to a small safe in the corner, spun the dial, and pulled out a thick leather binder. He placed it on the desk and opened it. "Read the header," he said. I looked at the embossed letters, Hart Legacy Holdings. "What is this?" I asked. "It is my life's work," Walter said. "People think I was just a foreman at the factory. They did not know I was buying land when everyone else was selling. They did not know I was investing in tech startups in the 80s when everyone said it was a bubble. I made money. Amy, a lot of it." I flipped through the pages. My eyes widened as I saw the valuations. Real estate portfolios, stock options, bonds. It was a fortune. It was enough money to buy Vanessa's perfect house 10 times over and burn it down for sport. "Does Dad know?" I asked. "Mark thinks I have a nice little nest egg." Walter snorted. "He thinks maybe there is $100,000. If he knew the truth, Vanessa would have had me declared incompetent and put in a home 5 years ago just to get control of the signature authority." He tapped the paper with his thick finger. "Money is just fuel. Amy, put it in the wrong engine, and it burns the whole thing down. Give it to Vanessa, and she destroys herself and everyone around her. Give it to Mark, and he hands it to Vanessa." He looked at me, his eyes blazing. "I am preparing a future, Amy, a fair one, for the people who actually deserve it." "Why are you telling me?" I whispered. "Because you are the only one who isn't waiting for me to die." he said simply, and because you need to understand something about power. He took a pen from the desk and wrote his name on a scrap of paper. Walter Hart. A signature, he said, staring at the ink. It is just ink on paper, but in the right place, it can start a war, it can end a marriage, it can free a prisoner. A signature can be shackles, Amy, or it can be a key. You have to decide which one yours is going to be. The tension between Walter and the rest of the family came to a head 3 months later at Thanksgiving. Vanessa insisted on hosting, mostly because she wanted to show off her new dining room set. Walter came, dressed in his best suit, which was 20 years out of style but immaculately pressed. The dinner was the usual theater. Logan was recounting a story about a party he had been to, exaggerating his exploits while Vanessa beamed. Mark was carving the turkey, nodding along. I was running back and forth to the kitchen, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates. Logan is thinking of majoring in business, Vanessa announced loudly, interrupting my father mid-sentence. He has such a head for strategy, just like his grandfather. Right, Walter? She smiled at Walter, a shark-like baring of teeth. She was fishing. She wanted him to confirm that Logan was the heir apparent. Walter slowly cut a piece of turkey. He chewed, swallowed, and wiped his mouth. Business requires discipline, Walter said, his voice cutting through the chatter. And it requires empathy. You cannot lead people if you do not understand them. He turned his chair slightly to look at me as I placed a bowl of cranberry sauce on the table. Amy, he said, I read that essay you wrote for your English class, the one about the ethics of silence. The table went quiet. Vanessa's smile faltered. Oh, did she show you that? Vanessa said dismissively. Amy is always scribbling something. It was brilliant, Walter said, his voice booming. It was the smartest thing I have read in 10 years. It had depth. It had character. That girl has more integrity in her little finger than this entire room has combined. The silence that followed was deafening. My face burned. I saw Logan roll his eyes. I saw Mark stare at his plate. But mostly, I saw Vanessa. Her eyes narrowed into slits. She looked from Walter to me, and for the first time, she looked worried. She realized she had miscalculated the old man's allegiances. Well, she said, her voice tight, it is nice that she has hobbies. It is not a hobby, Walter snapped. It is a gift. He reached out and squeezed my hand as I stood next to him. It was a declaration of war. He had publicly chosen the scapegoat over the golden child. That was the last meal we ever had together. 2 weeks later, the call came. A stroke. Massive. We rushed to the hospital. By the time we got there, Walter was in the ICU, hooked up to machines that beeped and hissed. He looked small in the bed, the iron finally melting away. Vanessa immediately went into performance mode. She harassed the nurses, demanding to speak to the chief of staff. She cried loudly in the hallway, telling anyone who would listen how close she was to her dear father-in-law. She was already planning the funeral attire. I stood in the corner of the room, unable to speak. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out. The only person who saw me was dying. Late on the second night, the nurse told us he was waking up for a moment. We crowded around the bed. Vanessa pushed to the front, dragging Mark with her. Walter, she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. We are here. Mark is here. We are all here to take care of things. Walter's eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy, unfocused. He looked at Mark, then at Vanessa. He tried to speak, but no sound came. Then, his eyes found me. I was standing at the foot of the bed, trying to make myself small. He lifted his hand. It was a trembling, weak movement, but it was deliberate. He was reaching for me. Amy, he rasped. Vanessa stiffened. He is confused, she whispered to Mark. He thinks she is his wife. I stepped forward, ignoring her. I took his hand. It was cold. He pulled me closer. With surprising strength, I leaned down, my ear close to his lips. The envelope, he whispered. The words were wet and broken. Marion has the envelope. I know, Grandpa, I said, tears finally spilling over. I know. He gripped my hand harder. His eyes cleared for one last second of lucidity. Do not let them sign for you, he wheezed. Do not let anyone sign for you. Then the grip loosened. The machines began to wail. I stood there, holding his dead hand, while Vanessa ushered Mark out of the room so she could start making calls. I was the only one who stayed until they covered his face. The reading of the will happened 4 days after the funeral. We gathered in the plush office of Mr. Marion, Walter's attorney. Marion was a man who matched his office. Oak-paneled, serious, and immovable. He wore a 3-piece suit and had a face that gave away absolutely nothing. Vanessa was vibrating with anticipation. She had spent the last few days speculating on the value of the house, the truck, and whatever savings Walter had. She had already mentally spent the money on a pool renovation and a new car for herself. Logan was bored, scrolling on his phone. Mark looked sad, but mostly tired. Mr. Marion sat down and adjusted his glasses. He opened a thin file. Walter Hart's estate is simple in terms of personal property, Marion began. The house is to be sold, with the proceeds going to pay off outstanding debts and funeral costs. The truck goes to his neighbor, Mr. Henderson. Vanessa frowned. Wait, that is it? What about the bank accounts? The savings? The personal savings account has a balance of $4,000, Marion said. It has been designated to be donated to the local library. $4,000? Vanessa's voice pitched up. That is impossible. The man lived like a pauper. He must have had more. Mark, tell him. Dad was pretty frugal, Ness, Mark mumbled. No! Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. He was hiding it. I know he was. Where is the rest of it? Mr. Marion looked at Vanessa with a calm detachment that was almost terrifying. Mrs. Hart, are you referring to Hart Legacy Holdings? Vanessa froze. What is that? The investment firm, Marion said. The entity that holds the majority of Mr. Hart's assets. Yes, Vanessa breathed, her eyes lighting up again. That? Who gets that? Marion closed the thin folder and placed his hands on top of it. Hart Legacy Holdings is not part of the general estate. It was placed into an irrevocable trust 3 weeks before Mr. Hart's passing. The control of that trust, and all its assets, is subject to a separate legal document that has already been executed. Executed to who? Vanessa demanded. Mark is his only son. Mark is not a beneficiary of the trust, Marion said. The room went silent. Mark looked like he had been slapped. Then who? Vanessa hissed. Who did he leave it to? Marion's eyes slid over to me. He did not say a word. He just looked at me. A tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He did not reveal the $25 million then. He did not reveal the signature. He simply said, The trustee has been notified separately. This meeting is concluded. Vanessa went ballistic. She screamed about undue influence. She screamed about senility. She threatened to sue Marion, the firm, and the ghost of Walter Hart. I sat there, perfectly still. I felt the weight of the secret in my pocket. The letter I had received that morning, the one I had not opened yet. Come on, Amy, Mark said, standing up, defeated. Let us go. As I walked past Mr. Marion, he stopped me. Miss Walsh, he said softly. I turned. He was very fond of you, Marion said. He wanted to make sure you had a key. I nodded, my throat tight. I walked out to the parking lot where Vanessa was screaming at Mark by the car. They looked small now, petty. They thought they had lost a few $1,000s. They thought they had been snubbed. They had no idea that the real storm was sitting in my backpack, waiting for me to turn the key. Walter had not just left me money. He had left me a nuclear option. And as I watched Vanessa berate my father, I touched the spot on my hand where Walter had squeezed it one last time. Do not let them sign for you. I would not. I would never let them hold the pen again. The courier truck did not look like a chariot of the gods. It was a brown, boxy van with a dent in the rear bumper and a layer of road dust coating its sides. But when it pulled up to the curb of my father's manicured driveway at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, my heart stopped beating for a full second. I was home alone. Vanessa was at her Pilates class, and Mark was at the office. I had taken a sick day from the bookstore, feigning a migraine because the grief of losing Walter was still a heavy, wet blanket over my shoulders that made getting out of bed feel like lifting iron. I opened the front door before the driver could ring the bell. I did not want the chime to echo through the empty house. It felt like any noise might alert Vanessa, even from 5 miles away. "Delivery for a Ms. Amy Walsh," the driver said, bored, holding out an electronic pad. "That is me," I said. My voice sounded thin in the humid air. "Sign here." I scribbled my name. He handed me a thick, rigid cardboard envelope. It was heavy. Not physically heavy. It probably weighed less than a pound. But it had a density to it, a gravitational pull that made my hands tremble as I took it. The return address was Marion, Sterling and Associates. I closed the door and locked it. Then I engaged the deadbolt. It was an irrational action. Vanessa had a key, obviously, but I felt a sudden, primal need to fortify my position. I took the envelope to my room. I did not sit at my desk. I sat on the floor, in the farthest corner, wedged between my bed and the wall, as if I were a child hiding from a thunderstorm. My fingers fumbled with the pull tab. The cardboard ripped with a loud tearing sound that made me flinch. Inside was a blue legal folder. I opened it. The first page was a cover letter from Mr. Marion. It was brief, professional, and terrifying. "Dear Ms. Walsh, enclosed strictly for your eyes only is the valuation and structural breakdown of the Hart Legacy Trust, of which you are the primary trustee. Please note that under the terms of the instrument, this information is confidential, and sharing it with non-beneficiaries may compromise the asset protection strategies in place." I turned the page. The world tilted on its axis. I blinked, sure that the grief was making me hallucinate. I closed my eyes, counted to 3, and opened them again. The number was still there, printed in bold, black courier font at the bottom of the summary of assets. Total asset valuation, $25,400,000. I stopped breathing. The air in my lungs turned into a vacuum. $25 million. It was a number that did not belong in my universe. It was a number that belonged to people on television, to people who owned yachts and islands. It did not belong to Amy Walsh, the girl who saved $40 from her paycheck to buy a used coat. It did not belong to the girl who was currently sitting on a carpet that she had vacuumed yesterday because her stepmother said it looked dingy. I felt a wave of vertigo so strong I had to put a hand on the floor to steady myself. Walter, my grandfather in his flannel shirts and his rusting truck. He had been sitting on an empire. He had been sitting on this mountain of power, watching us fight over scraps, watching Vanessa preen over a kitchen renovation that cost $20,000 while he held $25 million in his back pocket. I turned the page again, my hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. And there it was. At the bottom of the trust formation document was his signature, Walter J. Hart. The ink was blue, the lines were shaky. He must have signed this only weeks before the stroke, when his hands were already betraying him, but the pressure on the pen was heavy. He had pressed down hard, carving his name into the fiber of the paper. It looked like a vow. It looked like a scream. I traced the loop of the W with my fingertip. It was the only part of him I had left. But then my eyes drifted up to the text above the signature, and the cold reality of what he had done began to sink in. Beneficiary designation. The assets of the Hart Legacy Trust are to be divided equally, 50% to each party, between the following beneficiaries. 1. Amy Elizabeth Walsh. 2. Redacted identity sealed per Article 4. I frowned. Redacted? I flipped through the pages frantically, looking for the second name. Who else? Walter had no other grandchildren. Logan was not his blood, and he despised him. Mark was his son. But Marion had clearly said Mark was out. Was it a charity? A long-lost sibling? I found the explanation in Article 4, a section highlighted in yellow. The identity of the second beneficiary shall remain sealed and known only to the trustee, Amy Walsh, and the draftsman, Mr. Marion, until such time as the conditions of safety can be guaranteed. The trustee holds the fiduciary duty to protect the second beneficiary's interest. The second beneficiary is designated as a silent partner until their 25th birthday or upon the activation of the emergency clause. I was not just an heir, I was a guardian. I was holding half of this fortune for someone else, someone Walter was protecting even more fiercely than he was protecting me. I read on, and then I saw the clauses that made my blood run cold. Article 7, the Anti-Interference Clause. No parent, step-parent, legal guardian, or spouse of the trustee shall have any right to access, manage, borrow against, or influence the distribution of these funds. Specifically, Mr. Mark Hart and Mrs. Vanessa Hart are expressly prohibited from any involvement in the Hart Legacy Trust. Any attempt by these individuals to access the funds will result in an immediate freeze of all discretionary distributions to the trustee. He had named them. He had etched their exclusion into stone. But it was Article 9 that made me gasp. Article 9, the Duress and Safety Protocol. If the trustee, Amy Walsh, is found to be under duress, coercion, or physical threat intended to force a transfer of assets, the trust shall immediately convert to a fully vested, untouchable asset protection structure. Control will bypass the trustee temporarily and be managed solely by the law office to ensure the safety of the beneficiaries. Furthermore, any evidence of physical harm caused to the trustee by a family member will trigger the immediate scorched earth protocol, permanently disinheriting any party associated with the aggressor from any future consideration. Scorched earth, I whispered. Walter knew. He knew exactly what Vanessa would do if she found out. He had built a trap. If she tried to take it by force, she would ensure she never got a dime. I reached the end of the document. A small white envelope fell out from between the legal pages. It had my name on it in Walter's handwriting. I tore it open. It was a note, written on his stationery. Amy, if you are reading this, the wolves are already circling. I know the number scares you. It should. Money is heavy, but you are strong enough to carry it. I could not give it all to you. I am sorry. There is another, someone who needs this shield just as much as you do. You do not know her yet, but you will. When the time is right, Marion will tell you. But remember this money is not yours alone. That is your safety. If they think you have all the power, they will try to break you to get it. Tell them nothing. But if they find out, tell them you are just the gatekeeper. You must never be alone. Amy, I left you this so you would never have to be alone again. Love, Grandpa. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed. A silent, heaving sob that racked my body. You do not know her yet. The second beneficiary was a woman. Who was she? Why was she a secret? The sound of the garage door opening below me cut through my grief like a knife. Vanessa was home. Panic, cold and electric, shot through my veins. I looked at the documents spread out on the floor. The blue folder, the bold text saying, 25 million. If she walked in right now, if she decided to be motherly and check on my migraine, she would see it. She would see the number. And the war would start before I even had my armor on. I scrambled. I shoved the papers back into the folder. My hands were shaking so badly I creased the cover page. Where to hide it? My room had no lock that she respected. She cleaned, snooped, regularly. Under the mattress was the first place she would look. The drawers were unsafe. I looked at the closet, the loose floorboard. I ran to the closet, shoving my hanging clothes aside. I dropped to my knees and pried up the edge of the board I had loosened years ago to hide my journal. The space was small, dusty, and filled with insulation. I shoved the blue folder into the dark gap, pushing it deep, away from the edge. I replaced the board. I dragged my laundry hamper over the spot. Amy, Vanessa's voice floated up the stairs. It was cheerful, light. Are you feeling any better? I picked up some green juice. I stood up, smoothing my shirt. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought she would hear it through the floor. I am coming down, I called out. My voice sounded steady. How? How was I not screaming? I walked to the mirror. I looked at my reflection. I looked the same. Pale skin, dark circles under my eyes, messy bun. I looked like the tired, invisible stepdaughter. But I was worth $12.5 million, and I was the guardian of $12.5 million more. I washed my face with cold water and went downstairs. Vanessa was in the kitchen, unpacking groceries. She looked up as I entered, scanning my face with that X-ray vision of hers. You look pale, she said. Just a headache, I said, leaning against the counter. Did the mail come? She asked casually, turning to put a carton of almond milk in the fridge. I froze. I think so. I did not check. That is weird, she said, pausing. I saw the truck pulling away when I was turning onto the main road. It looked like a courier truck. Did they ring the bell? I was sleeping, I lied. I did not hear anything. Vanessa closed the fridge door slowly. She turned to face me. Amy, she said, a sweet, poisonous smile playing on her lips. You know you cannot hide things from me. If you are in trouble, if you are getting letters from, I don't know, creditors or boys, you can tell me. There is nothing, Vanessa, I said. I swear. She stared at me for a long moment. The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. She was sniffing the air. She sensed a secret. She fed on secrets. Well, she said finally, breaking the tension, if a package did come, it will be on the porch. I will go look. She walked past me to the front door. I held my breath. She opened the door. She looked down at the empty mat. She stepped out and looked around the porch. She came back in, her brow furrowed. Nothing, she muttered. Must have been for the neighbors. She looked at me again, and this time, there was a flicker of genuine suspicion in her eyes, not because she knew about the money, but because she knew me. She knew I was a bad liar. She could smell the anxiety radiating off me like heat. You are acting strange, Amy, she said softly. Since the funeral, you are distant. I am grieving, I said. We are all grieving, she snapped, her patience fraying. But life goes on. We have bills to pay. We have a future to plan. Speaking of which, your father and I were talking. Since Walter left you nothing, we need to talk about you paying rent now that you are 18. It is only fair. Rent. She was asking me for rent when I had a document upstairs that could buy this entire neighborhood. I looked at her. For the first time in years, I did not feel the urge to apologize. I did not feel the urge to shrink. I felt a cold, hard stone of resolve settling in my gut. We can talk about it later, I said. I am going to go lie down. I turned and walked away before she could dismiss me. As I climbed the stairs, I felt her eyes boring into my back. She knew something had shifted. The power dynamic in the house had changed, invisible but palpable, like a drop in barometric pressure before a hurricane. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, staring at the laundry hamper that covered the loose floorboard. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on Mr. Marion's card. He answered on the first ring. Miss Walsh, he said. I read it, I whispered. Then you understand, he said. Who is she? I asked. The second beneficiary. Who is she? I cannot tell you that over the phone, Marion said. And I cannot tell you yet. It is for her safety, Amy, and yours. If Vanessa knew there was a second person, a vulnerable person, she would use that. Is she related to me? She is family, Marion said enigmatically. That is all I can say. Listen to me. Amy, Vanessa has no legal standing, but that will not stop her from trying to manipulate you. She will try to charm you. Then she will try to guilt you. Then she will try to scare you. She is already suspicious, I said. Be careful, Marion warned. The document you have is a shield, But until the funds are fully transferred and the accounts are secured, you are in a gray zone. Do not sign anything she gives you. Do not agree to anything." "I won't." "And Amy?" "Yes." "Walter was right," he said. "You are not alone. But right now, you are the only line of defense. Hold the line." I hung up. Outside, the sky was darkening. A summer storm was rolling in, heavy and purple. Thunder rumbled in the distance, shaking the window pane. I lay back on my pillows and closed my eyes. I could hear Vanessa downstairs, opening cabinets, slamming drawers. She was restless. She was hunting. She did not know what she was looking for yet, but she would not stop until she found it. I thought about the $25 million beneath the floorboards. Not yours alone. Whoever she was, this secret woman, this other heir, I hoped she was safe. I hoped she was far away from Vanessa Hart. Because the storm was here, and I was the lightning rod. The house transformed. It was no longer a home. It was a panopticon. In the days following the arrival of the courier, the atmosphere in the Hart household shifted from passive neglect to active, suffocating surveillance. It was not subtle. It was the heavy, humid pressure of a storm front that refuses to break. I started noticing the small intrusions first. I would come home from my shift at the bookstore and find my bedroom door ajar. Just an inch. When I knew I had pulled it shut, my drawers were reorganized, not messy, but different. The stack of t-shirts was folded with the precision of a retail display, not the way I threw them in. Vanessa was hunting. She did not know what she was looking for, but she knew something had arrived. She had seen the truck. She had seen my face, and now she was methodically dismantling my privacy to find the source of my sudden, quiet confidence. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find my laptop open on the island. Vanessa was typing on it. "What are you doing?" I asked, my pulse spiking. She did not even flinch. She did not look guilty. She looked annoyed. "Your father asked me to update the family contact list," she said, not looking up. "I needed your email login to sync the calendar." "I have a password," I said, stepping forward. "Mark guessed it," she said, finally turning to me with a bored expression. "Birthday plus street name. Honestly, Amy, for someone who thinks she is so smart, you have terrible security hygiene." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She had been in my email. "Did you read my messages?" I asked. "I do not care about your little chats with the bookstore lady," she scoffed, closing the lid. "But we need to talk. Sit down." It was an ambush. My father walked in from the living room. He looked uncomfortable, wringing his hands. This was a rehearsed scene. Vanessa was the director. Mark was the unwilling actor who had memorized his lines to keep the peace. "Amy, honey," Mark started, pulling out a chair opposite me. "Vanessa and I have been looking at the finances since your grandfather passed. It is messy. There are bills. There are taxes." "And?" I asked, gripping the edge of the table. "And we think it is time to consolidate," Vanessa cut in. She placed a hand on Mark's shoulder, a gesture that looked supportive, but was actually controlling. She was steering him. "We are a family. We should operate like one. It makes no sense for you to have these little side accounts at credit unions or wherever you are hiding your money. It complicates the tax filing." "I file my own taxes," I said. "That is not the point," Vanessa said, her voice hardening. "The point is transparency. If you are living under this roof, eating our food, using our electricity, you are part of this financial ecosystem. Secrecy is toxic. Amy, it destroys trust." The irony was so thick it choked me. She was lecturing me on trust while trying to rob me blind. "I am 18, I said. "I am legally an adult. My finances are private." "You are selfish," Logan's voice came from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, eating an apple, watching the scene with amusement. "Excuse me?" I said. "You heard me," Logan said, taking a bite. "Mom and Dad have carried you for years. Now you have a job. You have got Grandpa's little inheritance, whatever it is, and you are acting like you are a stranger. It is ungrateful." "Logan, that is enough," Mark said weakly. But he did not look at his son. He looked at me. "Amy, listen. We just want to make sure you are protected. You are young. You do not know how to manage assets. We do." Vanessa slid a document across the smooth granite countertop. It was thick, stapled, and professionally bound. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a standard family management agreement," Vanessa said, her voice silky. "It just authorizes Mark, your own father, to help oversee your accounts. It simplifies things. It means we can pay your bills directly, manage your savings, invest it properly so it actually grows instead of sitting in a low-interest checking account." I opened the document. I was not a lawyer, but I had spent the last 4 nights reading every article on trust law I could find on the library computer. I knew enough to spot a trap. I scanned the first page. It was filled with soft language about familial cooperation and mutual benefit, but then I turned to page 3. "Hereby grants Mark Hart and Vanessa Hart full, durable, and irrevocable power of attorney regarding all financial assets, present and future. Authority to liquidate, transfer, or encumber assets without prior consultation. Surrender of all independent banking privileges." This was not a management agreement. This was an enslavement contract. If I signed this, they could drain the trust the moment it activated. They could take every cent I earned at the bookstore. They could legally strip me of everything. "I am not signing this," I said, closing the folder. The air in the kitchen vanished. "Excuse me?" Vanessa said. Her voice dropped an octave. The sweetness evaporated. "I said no," I repeated, my voice trembling slightly but holding firm. "I am happy to pay rent. I am happy to buy my own food. But I am not giving you power of attorney over my life." Vanessa looked at Mark. She did not scream. Instead, she did something far more effective. She started to cry. It was a masterful performance. Her chin wobbled. Her eyes filled with tears that spilled over at the exact right moment. She slumped into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "I tried, Mark," she sobbed. "I really tried. I took her in. I raised her like she was my own flesh and blood. I washed her clothes. I cooked her meals. And this? This is the thanks I get? She treats us like thieves. She looks at me with such hate." "Amy," Mark said, his face reddening with misplaced anger. "Look what you're doing to her. She loves you." "She wants my money, Dad," I said. "How dare you?" Mark slammed his hand on the table. "We do not need your money. We are trying to help you. You are an ignorant child who thinks she knows everything because she read a few books. Apologize to your mother." "She is not my mother," I whispered. Vanessa wailed louder. Logan pushed off the doorframe and walked toward me. He was 6 feet tall, an athlete. He used his size to intimidate. He stood too close, looming over me. "You should be careful, Amy," Logan said quietly, so only I could hear. "Mom has a plan, a big one. You are going to regret making her cry. You owe us everything, and we are going to collect." I stood up. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced them to move. "I am going to my room," I said. "If you walk away," Vanessa said, suddenly stopping her crying and looking up with cold, dry eyes, "do not expect any help from us. No car, no food, nothing. You are on your own." "I have been on one my whole life," I said. I walked out. That night, the house was silent, but it was the silence of a battlefield before the first shot. I did not sleep. I sat under my covers with a flashlight, writing in a composition notebook. June 14th, 7:30 p.m. Vanessa and Mark presented me with a power of attorney document. They attempted to coerce me into signing by threatening to cut off basic necessities. Logan used physical intimidation. Vanessa accessed my private email without consent. I was building a case. The next morning, I initiated my counterattack. I waited until Vanessa left for her tennis lesson. I took the bus to work. I could not use the car anymore. She had taken the keys. On my lunch break, I went to the post office. I rented a P.O. box, box number 402. I paid for 6 months in cash. Then I went to the library. I took the blue folder from my backpack. I carried it with me everywhere now. I never left it in the house. I scanned every single page of the trust document. I emailed the encrypted files to a new email address I created on a secure server. I sent a copy to Mrs. Calloway's personal email with a note. If anything happens to me, open this. Then I called Mr. Marne. I stood in the phone booth outside the library, watching the cars go by, feeling exposed. They tried to make me sign a power of attorney. I told him. Did you sign? Marion asked sharply. No. Good. Listen to me. Amy, they are escalating because they are desperate. They know there is money, but they do not know how much, and they do not know they are locked out. The moment they realize they have zero access, they will get dangerous. What do? I asked. I cannot live there. It is a war zone. You have to hold on a little longer, Marion said. We need them to make a mistake. We need an overt act. Right now, it is just family drama. We need proof of malice to trigger the immediate removal clauses for the house. Removal clauses? The house belonged to Walter, Marion said. He let Mark live there, but the deed is in the trust. If they threaten you, I can evict them. But I need cause. I need them to cross the line from manipulation to actual harm. They are gaslighting me, I said. They are telling everyone I am unstable. That is their narrative, Marion said. We have the truth. Keep the journal. Record everything. Dates, times, direct quotes. You are a spy in enemy territory. Amy, act like one. I hung up. When I got home that evening, the locks had been changed. I stood on the porch, my key useless in the cylinder. I knocked. No answer. I could see lights on inside. I could see them sitting at the dinner table. They were eating roast chicken. I knocked harder. Logan looked up. He saw me through the window. He smiled and said something to Vanessa. She did not look up. They were freezing me out. I sat on the porch step for 2 hours. It started to rain. I was cold, hungry, and humiliated. Finally, at 10 o'clock, the door opened. Mark stood there. He looked ashamed, but he did not step aside. This is what happens when you do not respect the family, he said. You can come in, but you go straight to your room. No dinner. I walked past him. I was soaking wet. I scanned the documents, I said softly as I passed him. He froze. What documents? The ones you want, I lied. I sent them to a lawyer. If you lock me out again, he calls the police. It was a bluff, mostly. Marion would handle it, but not the police yet. But it worked. Fear flickered in Mark's eyes. I went to my room. I could hear them whispering downstairs. The dynamic had shifted again. They realized I was not just resisting. I was fighting back. Later that night, I received an encrypted email from Marion on my phone. Amy, I have finalized the secondary beneficiary protocols. The silent partner has been alerted to the situation. You are not fighting just for yourself anymore. Every day you hold out is a day you protect her too. Stay strong. Just let them cross the line. Once they do, the law stands with you. I looked at the rain streaking my window. They wanted a war? Fine. I touched the bruise forming on my arm where Logan had grabbed me earlier to move me out of the way. They were getting physical. They were getting sloppy. I opened my journal and wrote down the time. 10:15 p.m., lockout. Physical intimidation. Mark complicit. I was ready. The next time they tried to hurt me, they wouldn't be breaking a helpless girl. They would be triggering a landslide that would bury them all. The Saturday of the party arrived wrapped in humidity and the suffocating scent of expensive lilies. Vanessa had outdone herself. The backyard of our colonial house had been transformed into a catalog spread for high-end suburban living. White tents peeked over the manicured hedges. Waiters in crisp black uniforms moved like shadows through the crowd, offering champagne flutes and miniature crab cakes. A string quartet played soft, inoffensive classical music in the corner, competing with the laughter of the local elite. It was a celebration for Logan. My stepbrother had been accepted into the state university, barely, but to hear Vanessa tell it, he had just been drafted by the space program. I moved through the crowd like a specter. I was wearing a simple black dress, one I had bought from a thrift store 3 towns over, and I clutched my canvas tote bag against my side as if it contained a bomb. In a way, it did. I had not let the blue folder leave my sight since the day the courier arrived. I slept with it under my pillow. I showered with the bathroom door locked and the folder on the counter. And today, surrounded by the people who wanted to consume me, I held it close. Logan was holding court near the open bar. He was wearing a linen suit that cost more than my car. His face flushed with alcohol and unearned pride. "Yeah, it is all set," I heard him saying to a group of his friends, his voice carrying over the music. The old man finally kicked the bucket, and let us just say the inheritance is sorting itself out. Mom says the signature is practically on the check. I am thinking of upgrading the Jeep to a Range Rover before the semester starts. My stomach turned over. He spoke about Walter, my grandfather, the man who had built a legacy with calloused hands and a brilliant mind, as if he were nothing more than an ATM that had finally dispensed cash. "That is awesome, man," one of his friends said, clapping him on the back. "Drinks are on you tonight, then." "Drinks are on me forever," Logan laughed, raising his glass. I gripped the strap of my bag tighter. They were so confident. They were so sure that the world worked the way Vanessa said it did, that they were the main characters, and everyone else was just there to facilitate their storyline. I tried to slip toward the side gate, intending to leave, to walk to the library, anywhere but here. "Amy!" The voice was sharp, cutting through the humid air like a whip. I froze. Vanessa was standing on the patio steps. She looked radiant and terrifying in a silk emerald dress. She waved me over with a stiff, insistent hand. "Come here, sweetie," she called out, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I need your help with something inside." I hesitated. "Go on, Amy," Mrs. Gable, the neighbor who always complimented my gardening, said as she walked by. "Your mother needs you." "She is not my mother." I walked toward the house. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with the heat. I knew this was not about ice or napkins. The look in Vanessa's eyes was predatory. I followed her through the sliding glass doors into the sunroom. It was my favorite room in the house, or it had been. It was walls of glass, filled with plants, centered around a massive, heavy glass coffee table that sat on a Persian rug. Vanessa closed the sliding door behind us, shutting out the noise of the party. The string quartet became a muffled hum. "Sit down," she said. She did not sit. She stood on the other side of the glass table, her arms crossed. "I am leaving, Vanessa," I said. "I do not want to be here." "You are not going anywhere until we fix this mess you have made," she said. The door from the hallway opened, and my father, Mark, walked in. He looked sweaty and nervous. He loosened his tie as he entered, avoiding my eyes. "Is she going to sign?" Mark asked. "She is going to listen to reason," Vanessa said. She reached behind a potted fern and pulled out a document. It was the same power of attorney agreement they had tried to force on me days ago, but this time it had a pen clipped to the front. "We are done playing games, Amy," Vanessa said, her voice dropping the public sweetness. "Mark and I have been talking to a financial planner. We know Walter had assets. We know there is a trust. And we know that as an 18-year-old girl with no experience, you are legally vulnerable." "I am not vulnerable," I said. "I am protected." "You are stubborn," Mark said, stepping forward. "Amy, please, just sign the management agreement. We transfer the authority to me, I handle the accounts, and we give you an allowance, a generous allowance. You can focus on school. You will not have to worry about taxes or lawyers." "I do not want an allowance, Dad," I said. "I want my freedom." "Freedom costs money," Vanessa snapped. "And right now, you have none. You are working a minimum wage job at a bookstore. You cannot even afford a lawyer to fight us." "I have a lawyer," I said. "Mr. Marion." "Marion is an old fool who is confusing you," Vanessa said. She leaned over the table, her knuckles pressing into the glass. "Sign the paper, Amy. Do it now, and we can go back out there, cut the cake, and be a family. Do not ruin Logan's night." "I am not signing," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "Article 7 of the Hart Legacy Trust explicitly forbids you from managing the funds. If I sign this, I am violating the terms of the trust." Vanessa froze. Her eyes narrowed. "How do you know about Article 7? She whispered. I reached into my tote bag. I felt the cool, smooth surface of the blue folder. I had not planned to show them. Marion had told me to keep it hidden, but the pressure in the room was unbearable. They needed to know that they were not fighting a child. They were fighting a fortress. I pulled the folder out. I placed it on the glass table between us. "Because I have the document," I said. Vanessa stared at the blue folder. Hunger, naked and ugly, washed over her face. "Let me see that," she demanded. "You can look," I said, "but do not touch it." I flipped the folder open to the valuation page. I watched her eyes scan the text. I watched the moment she saw the number. $25,400,000. The reaction was visceral. Her breath hitched. Her pupils dilated until her eyes were almost entirely black. She did not look at me. She looked at the paper as if it were a religious idol. "$25 million," she breathed. The sound was almost obscene. Mark leaned over her shoulder. He gasped. "My God, Dad. Dad had $25 million? "It is ours," Vanessa whispered. "Mark, look at it. It is the legacy. It is everything we deserve." "It is not yours," I said. The spell broke. Vanessa's head snapped up. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it felt like heat on my skin. "What did you say?" "It is not yours," I repeated, stepping back slightly. "It is a trust. It is locked. You cannot touch it. Grandpa knew you would try. That is why he put the clauses in. That is why he skipped Dad." "He was senile!" Vanessa shrieked. Her voice rose, cracking the silence of the room. "He did not know what he was doing. You manipulated him. You spent all those weekends over there, poisoning him against his own son." "I listened to him," I yelled back. "I loved him. You just wanted his wallet." "You ungrateful little leech!" Vanessa lunged. She did not walk around the table. She came over it. She reached for the folder with desperate, clawing hands. I grabbed it first. I pulled it to my chest. "Give it to me," she screamed. "It is family property. Give it to me." "No." "Mark, get it from her," she commanded. My father stood there, paralyzed. He looked from the money to me, his face a mask of conflict and greed. He took a half step forward. "Amy," he pleaded, just let us see it." "You do not own me," I screamed at them. The words tore out of my throat, a lifetime of silence finally breaking. "I am not your servant. I am not your prop. And I am not your bank account." Vanessa lost all control. The mask of the suburban socialite disintegrated. She was a feral thing, driven by a lifetime of entitlement that was being denied. She rushed me. She came around the side of the table, her hands outstretched, her nails aimed at my face. She was not trying to slap me. She was trying to tackle me. I stepped back, but my heel caught on the edge of the rug. "Give me the signature," she shrieked. She shoved me. It was a hard, violent push, putting all her weight into my chest. I flew backward. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. I saw the horror on my father's face, not because I was falling, but because he knew what was behind me. The heavy glass coffee table. My lower back hit the edge of the glass first. The sound was not a shatter. It was an explosion. It sounded like a gunshot going off inside a cathedral. The tempered glass could not withstand the force of my body weight combined with the velocity of the shove. It detonated. I fell through the table. Shards of glass. sharp as scalpels, flew into the air. I hit the metal frame underneath, the air rushing out of my lungs with a sickening whoosh. Then I hit the floor, surrounded by a rain of jagged crystal. Pain, hot and blinding, seared across my scalp. A large piece of glass had sliced my arm. Another had cut my cheek. I lay there, stunned, the wind knocked out of me, looking up at the ceiling through a haze of shock. Silence, absolute, terrified silence filled the room. Then, the blood started to run. I felt it warm and sticky on my forehead, running into my eye. I felt it pooling under my arm. Vanessa stood over me. Her chest was heaving. She was not looking at my injuries. She was looking at the blue folder, which had slid across the floor and landed under the sofa, out of reach. "Look what you made me do," she hissed. She sounded like a child who had broken a toy. "You clumsy idiot! Look at this mess!" "Amy?" Mark's voice was a whisper. He looked at the blood spreading on the Persian rug. "Mark, get the folder," Vanessa snapped. "Before the guests come in." "She is bleeding, Ness," Mark said, his voice trembling. "I do not care. Get the folder. If she bleeds on the documents, they might be invalid." I tried to move, but the room spun violently. I groaned. Then, the sliding door shattered. Not the glass, but the lock. Someone pounded on the glass from the outside. "Call 911!" a voice screamed. It was Mrs. Gable. She was pressing her face against the exterior glass, her eyes wide with horror. She had heard the crash. She had seen the fall. "Oh, God," Mark whispered. "The neighbors." "Tell them she fell," Vanessa hissed, smoothing her dress, her eyes darting around frantically. "Mark, pull yourself together. She tripped. She was drunk. Tell them she was drunk." I, Mark stammered. The sliding door was wrenched open. It wasn't locked, just stuck. Mrs. Gable and 2 other guests burst in. "Do not touch her!" Mrs. Gable yelled. Rushing to my side, she looked at the blood, at the shattered table, at the glass embedded in the rug. "Oh my God! Someone get an ambulance! Hurry!" "It was an accident!" Vanessa cried out, her voice pitching into a theatrical wail. "She just stumbled. She was wearing those cheap heels, and she just went right through the table. Oh, my poor baby. Poor." I looked up at Mrs. Gable. I tried to speak, but my mouth tasted like copper. "Mrs. Gable looked at Vanessa. Then she looked at the position of the glass. She looked at where I had landed. Physics did not lie. You do not fall backward through a table with that much force unless you are pushed. "She did not trip, Vanessa," Mrs. Gable said coldly. "I saw you push her." Vanessa's face went white. "You are mistaken," Vanessa said, her voice hardening. "You saw nothing." "I saw everything," Mrs. Gable said. She pulled out her phone. "I am calling the police." "No!" Mark shouted. "Please, Betty, do not. We can handle this. It is a family matter." "Look at her." Mrs. Gable pointed at me. "She is sliced open. Mark, this is not a family matter. This is assault." 10 minutes later, the room was filled with blue uniforms. The party outside had died, replaced by the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. A police officer was kneeling beside me. He was young, with a kind face. He was applying pressure to the cut on my arm with a gauze pad. "Can you tell me what happened, miss?" he asked. I looked across the room. Vanessa was standing in the corner, talking to a sergeant. She was using her hands, animating her story, crying on cue. She was pointing at me, shaking her head, playing the victim. Mark was standing beside her, nodding like a bobblehead, corroborating her lies. They looked so united, perfect. But then I looked at the floor. The blue folder was peeking out from under the sofa. The paramedic was loading me onto the stretcher. The officer stood up, walking alongside me. "She says you tripped," the officer said quietly. "She says you were hysterical and lost your balance." I looked the officer in the eye. I let the pain sharpen my voice. I let the years of silence die in that room filled with broken glass. "I did not trip," I rasped. "Then why did this happen?" he asked. I looked at Vanessa one last time. She was staring at me, her eyes pleading for my silence, threatening me with future retribution if I spoke. I did not care about her threats anymore. Because of a signature, I whispered, loud enough for the room to hear. A signature? The officer asked. My grandfather's signature, I said, as they lifted the stretcher. She tried to steal it, and when I said no, she tried to kill me. The officer stopped walking. He turned slowly to look at Vanessa. The sergeant stopped writing in his notebook. The room went deadly silent. Vanessa's face crumbled. For the first time, the facade did not just crack, it shattered, just like the table. As they wheeled me out into the humid night air, past the shocked faces of Logan's friends and the neighbors, I did not look down. I looked up at the sky. I was bleeding, I was in pain, but I was free. The hospital room smelled of iodine and industrial floor wax. It was a sharp, chemical scent that burned the back of my throat, grounding me in a reality I desperately wanted to escape. I sat on the edge of the examination bed, my legs dangling, while a doctor with cold hands stitched the laceration on my upper arm. Every time the needle pierced my skin, I flinched, but the physical pain was a dull throb compared to the adrenaline still crashing through my system like a tidal wave. 20 stitches, the doctor said, tying off the final knot with efficient, practiced movements. You are lucky. Miss Walsh, ideally, that shard of glass would have missed the radial nerve. It was a matter of millimeters. You are going to have a scar, but you will keep the function of your hand. Thank you, I whispered. My voice sounded wrecked, scraped raw by the screaming I had done inside my own head. A woman was sitting in the plastic chair in the corner of the room. She had been there since I arrived, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Her badge identified her as Tanya Brooks, a social worker from the hospital's crisis intervention unit. She had kind eyes, the sort that had seen too much of the world's ugliness, but refused to turn hard because of it. Amy, Tanya said softly, waiting for the doctor to leave the room before she spoke. Officer Miller needs to come back in to finalize his report. He needs to know exactly what happened in that sunroom. I know you are tired. I know you are hurting, but this is the moment where the record gets set. If you leave anything out to protect them, you are not just hurting yourself. You are protecting an abuser. I looked down at my arm, at the angry red line of the incision, and at the bruises already blooming like dark flowers on my ribs where the table edge had caught me. Protect them? I thought of Mark, standing paralyzed while I bled on the rug. I thought of Vanessa, screaming about the folder while I lay in a pile of shattered glass. I am done protecting them, I said. Officer Miller walked in. He was the same officer from the house, the one who had looked at Vanessa with dawning realization. He held a small recorder. Okay, Amy, Miller said, pulling up a stool. Walk me through it. Start from when Mrs. Hart called you into the room. I told him everything. I told him about the party. I told him about the ambush. I told him about the power of attorney document they tried to force me to sign. I told him about the blue folder and the $25 million. When I mentioned the money, Miller stopped writing. He looked up, his eyebrows shooting toward his hairline. 25 million, he repeated. Yes, I said. It was my grandfather's trust. Vanessa saw the number, and she snapped. She tried to physically take the document from me. When I refused to let go, she shoved me, hard. She stated you tripped, Miller said, though his tone suggested he did not believe it for a second. I was standing on a flat rug, I said. I was wearing flats, not heels, and I fell backward with enough force to shatter a tempered glass table. You do not do that by tripping. She threw me. Miller nodded grimly. We have a witness statement from Mrs. Gable that corroborates your account. She saw the shove through the glass door. We are charging Vanessa Hart with assault in the second degree. Given the financial motive you just described, we might be looking at attempted extortion as well. What about my father? I asked. The question tasted like ash. He was present, Miller said. He did not intervene. We are looking into aiding and abetting. But for now, He is being questioned. But Amy, I need to be clear. You cannot go back to that house. I know, I said. I have nowhere else to go. You do, a deep voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Mr. Marion stood there. He looked out of place in the fluorescent glare of the ER. Dressed in his charcoal three-piece suit, holding a leather briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. But his face, usually a mask of professional detachment, was etched with something that looked entirely human. It looked like grief, and it looked like rage. Mr. Marion, I said, relief flooding my chest so hot it made me dizzy. I am her attorney, Marion said to Officer Miller, producing a card. I am also the executor of the estate that is the subject of this dispute. I will be taking custody of my client upon her discharge. Miller looked at the card, then at me. I nodded. She is safe with him, I said. Once the officer left to file the paperwork, Marion closed the door. He walked over to the bed and looked at my bandaged arm. He did not say anything for a long moment. His jaw worked, grinding his teeth together. I told Walter, Marion said, his voice low and dangerous. I told him that leaving you in that house was a risk. He thought the money would be a shield. He did not realize it would be a target until it was too late. It is not your fault, I said. It is my responsibility, Marion corrected. He set his briefcase on the rolling table. Amy, what happened tonight is terrible, but legally, it changes everything. Remember Article 9? The duress and safety protocol, I said. Exactly, Marion said. By physically assaulting you to gain access to the trust, Vanessa Hart has triggered the scorched earth clause. As of 1 hour ago, I filed an emergency motion with the probate court. The trust is no longer dormant. It has vested immediately and fully to ensure your protection. You have access to everything, the funds for your medical care, for a new home, for security. It is all yours, right now. And Vanessa? I asked. Vanessa is fully disinherited, Marion said with cold satisfaction. Not just from the money. The clause stipulates that any beneficiary or potential beneficiary who causes physical harm to the trustee forfeits all claims. She cannot sue. She cannot contest. If she tries, we counter-sue for the attempt on your life. She is done. Amy, she just cost herself the very fortune she was trying to steal. Tanya, the social worker, nodded approvingly. That is justice. But there is something else, Marion said. He looked at Tanya, then at me. Something I could not tell you until the trust was fully activated. Something Walter made me swear to keep sealed until you were safe. He opened his briefcase. He pulled out a second envelope. It was identical to the one I had received, but the seal was still unbroken. You asked me about the second beneficiary, Marion said. You asked who the other person was? My heart skipped a beat. Yes. Walter knew that the money was too much for one person to carry, Marion said. And he knew that you were not the only victim of Vanessa Hart's ambition. He handed me the envelope. Open it. My hands, stiff from the trauma, fumbled with the flap. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a birth certificate. I scanned the lines. Name of child, Jade Maria Morales. Date of birth, October 12th, 2002. Mother's name, Vanessa Marie Hart. I froze. I looked up at Marion, confusion warring with shock. Vanessa? I whispered. But Vanessa only has Logan. She always said Logan was her first, her only. Vanessa lied, Marion said. Before she met your father, before she reinvented herself as the perfect suburban socialite, Vanessa had a life she wanted to erase. She was 20 years old. She got pregnant. It did not fit her plan. She did not want a baby dragging her down while she hunted for a rich husband. Tanya gasped. She abandoned her? She surrendered her to the state, Marion said. Not for adoption. She just walked away. She left the baby at a fire station in Ohio and never looked back. She erased the girl from her history so completely that even Mark does not know she exists. I looked down at the paper. Jade Morales. But how? I asked. How did Walter know? Walter knew everything, Marion said. He hired private investigators years ago. He wanted to know exactly who his son had married. He found the records. He tracked the girl down. Marion pulled a photograph out of the envelope and placed it in my hand. It was a candid shot, taken from a distance. It showed a young woman, about 22 years old. She was wearing grease-stained coveralls, her hair tied back in a messy bandana. She was leaning over the open hood of a pickup truck, holding a wrench. She looked tired. She looked hard. But her eyes? She had Vanessa's eyes. But where Vanessa's eyes were cold and calculating, this girl's eyes were fierce and defiant. "Her name is Jade," Marion said softly. "She is a mechanic in a small town outside of Cleveland. She has been in and out of foster care her whole life. She aged out of the system 4 years ago. She works 60 hours a week just to pay rent on a trailer." "She is my stepsister," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She is the one person in the world who understands what it means to be discarded by Vanessa. Marion said. Walter watched her from afar. He sent anonymous donations to her foster homes, but he never made contact. He was afraid that if he revealed her, Vanessa would destroy her life to keep the secret buried. So he put her in the trust, I realized. 50%, Marion said. He wanted the two of you to have the power. The girl Vanessa kept to use as a servant, and the girl Vanessa threw away like trash. He wanted you two to hold the keys to the empire she desperately wanted. Tears pricked my eyes, not tears of pain, but tears of overwhelming, heartbreaking gratitude. Walter had played the long game. He had seen the cruelty in his daughter-in-law, and he had weaponized his legacy to protect the very children she had abused. "Does she know?" I asked, looking at the photo of the mechanic. "She knows nothing," Marion said. "She does not know she has a mother. She does not know she has a sister, and she certainly does not know she is worth $12.5 million. Article 9, Tanya said suddenly, looking up from her notes. The safety clause. You said if Vanessa hurts the trustee, she loses everything. Does that apply to Jade too? It does, Marion said, a small, grim smile touching his lips. The clause is reciprocal. By attacking Amy, Vanessa has legally severed her rights to any claim regarding Jade as well. If we had revealed Jade earlier, Vanessa might have tried to claim maternal rights to get to the money, but now, because she shoved Amy through that table, she is legally classified as an aggressor against the trust beneficiaries. She cannot get near Jade. She cannot touch a dime of Jade's money. I started to cry. I cried for the 22-year-old girl fixing trucks in Ohio, struggling to pay rent while her biological mother threw parties costing thousands of dollars. I cried for Walter, who had carried this secret to his grave, and I cried for myself, because for the first time in my life, I realized I had a teammate. I am not alone, I whispered. No, Marion said, you are not. He placed a document on the bedside table. This is the activation paperwork for your half of the trust, Marion said. And this is the authorization for me to contact Jade Morales and bring her here. I need your signature. Amy, not just as a beneficiary, but as the primary trustee. You have to invite her in. I reached for the pen with my good hand. My fingers were shaking, but my resolve was iron. Vanessa had beaten me because she thought I was weak. She thought I was an isolated obstacle standing between her and a payday. She did not know that every blow she struck was forging a bond between me and the daughter she had forgotten. She did not know that her violence had just handed us the sword we would use to cut her out of our lives forever. She hit me for the money, I said, my voice steady and hard. She wanted the signature. Well, she is going to get it. I signed my name on the line, Amy Elizabeth Walsh. Bring her here, I told Marion. Bring my sister home. I will leave tonight, Marion promised. I looked at the photo of Jade one last time. Vanessa had spent her life curating a perfect image, a perfect family, a perfect lie. She had abused me to maintain it. She had abandoned Jade to protect it. She had no idea that the two ghosts she had created were about to become the owners of her world. She does not know, I said to the empty room after Marion left. She thinks she lost $25 million tonight. She does not know she just armed the daughter she threw away. I laid my head back on the pillow, the pain in my arm finally receding into the background. The fight was not over. The legal battle would be ugly. Vanessa would claw and scream. But she had already lost, because the signature she wanted so badly, the one she was willing to kill for, now belonged to us, and we were never giving it back. The courtroom was freezing. It was a deliberate, sterile cold that seemed designed to strip away any pretense of warmth or humanity. I sat on the left side of the aisle, flanked by Mr. Marion and a court-appointed advocate. My arm was in a sling, the white gauze stark against my black sweater, and the stitches on my forehead throbbed in time with the ticking of the wall clock. On the other side of the aisle sat Vanessa and Mark. They looked diminished, without the perfectly controlled lighting of their sunroom or the social armor of their dinner parties. They looked like what they were, two desperate people caught in a trap of their own making. Vanessa was wearing a navy blue suit, conservative and modest, a costume she had likely bought specifically for this performance. Mark stared at his hands, refusing to look at me. "Case number 472, the bailiff announced, in the matter of the petition for a permanent protective order, Walsh versus Hart. The hearing was not a criminal trial. That would come later. But it was the first skirmish in the war for the narrative. Vanessa's lawyer, a slick man with a shiny tie named Mr. Henderson, stood up. "Your Honor," Henderson began, his voice oozing with practiced sincerity, "this entire situation is a tragic misunderstanding. Mrs. Hart is a devoted stepmother who has raised Ms. Walsh since she was a child. The incident in question was a domestic accident. Ms. Walsh was intoxicated at a family celebration, became hysterical, and fell. My client is the victim of a rebellious teenager's fabrication." I felt a flash of heat in my chest, but Marion placed a calming hand on my uninjured forearm. He did not speak. He simply slid a folder toward the judge. "Your Honor," Marion said, his voice like grinding stones, "we have submitted the emergency room admission records. They detail a blood alcohol content of 0.00. The petitioner was stone-cold sober. We have also submitted photographs of the injuries, which the attending trauma surgeon has certified are consistent with a high-velocity backward impact caused by external force, not a stumble." The judge, a woman with graying hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human cruelty, opened the folder. She flipped through the photos. The silence in the room was heavy. "And," Marion continued, "we have the sworn affidavit of Mrs. Elizabeth Gable, a neighbor who witnessed the assault through the glass doors. She specifically describes Mrs. Hart lunging at and shoving the petitioner." Vanessa shifted in her seat. She leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer, her face tight with suppressed rage. "Mrs. Hart," the judge said, looking up from the photos, "do you deny that you were in a dispute over financial documents at the time of this accident?" "It was a family discussion," Vanessa said, her voice trembling with feigned emotion. "I was just trying to help her manage her inheritance. She was overwhelmed." "Overwhelmed," the judge repeated flatly. She picked up another piece of paper. "I have here a transcript of text messages recovered from Mr. Mark Hart's phone, sent to you 10 minutes before the incident. She has the folder. Get the signature tonight or we are in trouble. Can you explain that?" Mark went pale. He looked at Vanessa, panic flaring in his eyes. He had not known his phone had been imaged by the police. I meant," Mark stammered. "It seems clear to me," the judge cut him off. "This was not a family discussion. This was a shaking down. I am granting the permanent protective order. Mrs. Hart, Mr. Hart, you are to stay 500 feet away from Ms. Walsh at all times. You are not to contact her, directly or through third parties. And given the severity of the injuries and the financial motive, I am forwarding the transcript of this hearing to the district attorney's office to aid in their criminal investigation." Vanessa gasped. "Criminal? But I have a reputation in this town." "Your reputation," the judge said, closing the file, "is the least of your concerns right now. You abused a position of trust to exploit a young woman you were supposed to protect. Step down." Walking out of that courtroom felt like breathing for the first time in years, but the victory inside the legal chamber was nothing compared to the destruction happening outside of it. The suburbs, I learned, operate on a brutal economy of status. Vanessa had spent years curating her image as the queen bee of the neighborhood, but she had forgotten that bees sting intruders, and right now, she was the intruder. The fallout was swift and absolute. Mrs. Gable had not just called the police, she had called everyone. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, the story of the evil stepmother who pushed her daughter through a glass table for money had circulated through the country club, the PTA, and the local real estate board. I stayed in a secure hotel suite that Marion arranged, but I watched their world crumble from a distance through the screen of my phone. It started with the for sale signs. 2 days after the arrest, Vanessa was fired from the luxury brokerage firm where she worked. They did not want a realtor associated with felony assault and elder financial abuse allegations. Her bio was scrubbed from their website within 3 hours. Then came the social excommunication. A neighbor posted a video of Vanessa trying to attend her usual yoga class, only to be turned away at the door by the manager because other members expressed safety concerns. Vanessa stood on the sidewalk, screaming about discrimination, looking unhinged. The video had 40,000 views. But the blow that truly shattered the family dynamic came for Logan. My stepbrother had been so proud of his acceptance to the state university, riding high on the family name and the promise of a lacrosse scholarship. But university admissions boards are risk-averse, and scholarships often come with morality clauses. When the police report became public record, detailing how Logan had intimidated me and how the family was under investigation for extortion, the university rescinded his offer. I received a voicemail from him 3 days after the hearing. It was blocked by my phone, but I listened to it anyway. "You ruined my life. You freak," he slurred, sounding drunk. "They pulled my spot. I have nowhere to go. I hope you die." I deleted the message. I did not feel fear anymore. I felt a strange, detached pity. They had built their entire identities on the foundation of being better than everyone else. Now that the foundation was gone, they were just angry, empty people standing in the wreckage. Mark was suspended from his accounting firm pending an internal audit. It turned out that when you are accused of trying to steal $25 million from a family trust, your employers start wondering what else you might have stolen. They were isolated, they were broke, and they were terrified. But I had one more ghost to face. A week after the hearing, Mr. Marion called me to his office. "She is here," he said simply. I felt my stomach drop. "Jade?" "She drove in from Ohio last night. I put her up in a motel near the highway. She would not accept the hotel suite. She said she does not take charity." I dressed carefully that morning. I did not want to look like the heiress I technically was. I wore jeans and a sweater. I wanted to look like a sister. Marion's office was quiet, the heavy oak door shutting out the noise of the city. Sitting in one of the leather guest chairs was a girl who looked like a reflection in a distorted mirror. Jade Morales was striking. She had dark, messy hair pulled back in a severe bun, and her skin was tanned from working outdoors. She was wearing a pair of gray coveralls with the name Mike's Auto Body embroidered on the pocket. Her hands, resting on the arms of the chair, were calloused and stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. She did not stand up when I walked in. She looked me up and down with eyes that were sharp, dark, and incredibly guarded. "So," Jade said. Her voice was raspy, unused to soft tones. "You are the other one." "I am Amy," I said, extending my good hand. She looked at my hand, then at the sling on my arm. She did not shake it. "Mr. Marion says you took a dive through a table," she said. "I was pushed," I corrected, sitting in the chair opposite her. "By her," Jade said. She did not use Vanessa's name. She said the word her like it was a curse. "Yes," I said, "by Vanessa." Jade let out a short, humorless laugh. She leaned back, crossing her arms over her chest. Figure she would break eventually, Jade said. I saw her once, about 5 years ago. I saved up money for a bus ticket, came to this town, stood outside that big white house you all live in. I watched her come out to get the mail. She looked perfect, like a doll. I thought about walking up to her, asking her why she left me at a fire station like a bag of old clothes.
Why didn't you? I asked softly.
Because she looked at the mailman like he was dirt, Jade said. And I figured if she looked at a guy doing his job like that, she would look at me worse, so I went home. My heart broke for her. I had lived in the house with the monster, but Jade had lived in the shadow of the monster's absence. She is not perfect, I said. She is a hollow shell. She spent my entire life trying to erase me because I wasn't hers, and she spent your entire life erasing you because you were— Yeah, well, Jade shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the emotion in my voice. Marion says the old man knew about me, says he left me something. Mr. Marion, who had been standing quietly by the window, stepped forward. He placed the blue folder, the twin to mine, on the desk in front of Jade. Walter Hart left you 50% of the Hart Legacy Trust, Marion said. The current valuation of your share is approximately $12.7 million. Jade stared at the folder. She did not reach for it. She did not gasp. She just stared, her jaw tightening. I do not want it, she said. Jade, I said. I do not want their money, she snapped, her voice rising. I do not want anything from that bloodline. I have taken care of myself since I was 16. I fix cars. I pay my rent. I do not need some pity payout from the father of the woman who dumped me. It is not a pity payout, Marion said calmly, and it is not Vanessa's money. That is the point. Miss Morales, this money belonged to Walter, and Walter despised what Vanessa did to you. He set this up specifically so that you would have the power, and she would have nothing. Jade looked at him, skeptical. She gets nothing? Because she attacked Amy, Marion said, gesturing to me. She triggered a disinheritance clause. If you accept this, you are effectively permanently locking Vanessa out of the fortune she has been trying to marry into for 20 years. You are not taking charity, you are taking justice. Jade looked at me. Her eyes searched my face, looking for the lie, looking for the trick. She hurt you bad? Jade asked, nodding at my arm. She wanted the money, I said. She screamed at me. She told me I was nothing. She said I was just a servant, and when I held on to this folder, she tried to kill me. I took a breath. She thinks she is better than us. Jade. She thinks because she wears silk and we work for a living. She deserves the world. Walter wanted to prove her wrong. He wanted to show that the two people she threw away, the stepdaughter she abused and the daughter she abandoned, are the ones who actually hold the keys. Jade looked down at her grease-stained hands. She flexed her fingers. $12 million, she whispered. That is a lot of transmissions. It is freedom, I said. It means you never have to answer to a boss again. It means you can buy the shop. It means you can burn that White House to the ground if you want to. Jade cracked a smile. It was small, sharp, and dangerous. I like the burning part, she said. She reached out and touched the blue folder. She ran her rough thumb over the edge of the paper. So, Jade said, if I sign this, she knows? She will be notified that the trust has been distributed, Marion said. She will see the names. She will see Amy Walsh and Jade Morales. She will know that her secrets are out, and her bank account is empty. Jade picked up the pen. She held it like a dagger. I used to dream about her coming back for me, Jade said, her voice low. Then I grew up and realized she was never coming. I thought I was trash. I thought there was something wrong with me. She looked up at me, and for the first time, the guard came down. I saw the sister beneath the mechanic. But she is the one with the problem, Jade said. She is the one who is going to end up with nothing. Exactly, I said. Jade opened the folder. She did not hesitate. She signed her name at the bottom of the acceptance page. Her signature was bold, jagged, and large. It took up more space than the line allowed. Jade Maria Morales. She capped the pen and tossed it onto the mahogany desk. It made a sharp clatter. Okay, Jade said, standing up. She looked taller now. She looked lighter. So, sister, what do we do now? Now, I said, standing up to meet her. We go to the final shareholder meeting, and we fire them. Fire who? Jade asked. My father, I said, and anyone else who helped her. Jade grinned. I can do that. I have been fired plenty of times. Be nice to be on the other side of the desk. Marion closed the briefcase. I will set it up. Hart Legacy Holdings has a board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Mark Hart is currently the acting treasurer. Despite his suspension, he will be there. Vanessa will likely try to accompany him, assuming she can talk her way back in. She won't be able to talk her way out of this, I said. I looked at Jade. We were strangers, bound by blood and trauma, and a sudden, terrifying amount of money. But as we stood there in the quiet office, I felt a shift in the universe. Vanessa had spent 20 years trying to keep us apart, trying to keep us down, trying to keep us quiet. Tomorrow, she was going to hear us roar. You hungry? I asked Jade. I know a place that makes really good burgers. My treat. Jade laughed. With $12 million? Yeah, I guess it is your treat. But next time, I am buying. We walked out of the office together, leaving the blue folders on the desk. We didn't need to carry them anymore. The power wasn't in the paper. It was in us. The glass walls of the conference room on the 42nd floor of the Hart Legacy Holdings building offered a panoramic view of the city, but the only view I cared about was the door. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. The air conditioning was humming a low, steady note that sounded like a held breath. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, the leather chair swallowing my frame. My arm was still in the sling, a stark white reminder of the violence that had brought us here. To my right sat Jade. She had traded her mechanic's coveralls for a dark blazer we had bought the night before, but she refused to wear heels. She wore her heavy work boots, scuffed and oil-stained, tapping a rhythmic beat against the expensive carpet. They are late, Jade said, checking the clock on the wall. They are not late, Mr. Marion said from his standing position by the window. They are stalling. They are trying to intimidate us by making us wait. It is a power move. It is a stupid move, Jade muttered. I have got a transmission to rebuild back in Ohio. I do not have time for mind games. Just wait, I said softly. The game is about to end. At 9:10, the double doors swung open. Vanessa walked in first, despite the protective order, despite the social pariah status she had achieved in the last week. She walked in with her chin high. She was wearing a white suit, an attempt to look innocent, angelic even, but her eyes were rimmed with red, and the lines around her mouth were deep trenches of stress. Mark followed her. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He carried a briefcase that looked too heavy for him, his shoulders slumped, his eyes darting around the room until they landed on me. He flinched when he saw the sling. They stopped dead when they saw Jade. Vanessa's eyes flicked over the girl in the work boots, dismissing her instantly as some sort of assistant or paralegal. She focused her laser gaze on Mr. Marion. This is ridiculous. Marion, Vanessa announced, throwing her purse onto the table. You cannot hold a board meeting without the treasurer. Mark is here. We are here to sort out this misunderstanding regarding the trust distribution. There is no misunderstanding, Mrs. Hart, Marion said calmly. Please, take a seat. I will stand, Vanessa snapped. I have spoken to my lawyers. We know that Walter's will was drafted when he was in declining health. We are contesting the competency of the signor, and we are certainly contesting the validity of any document signed by this child. She pointed a manicured finger at me, while she was emotionally unstable. I am not unstable, Vanessa, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the large room. And I am not alone. Oh, please, Vanessa scoffed. You have always been alone. Amy, that is your problem. You think the world owes you something because your mother died. Well, newsflash, sweetie, the world runs on power, not pity, and Mark has the power. He is the sun. He is the rightful heir. Actually, a deep voice boomed from the other end of the table. We all turned. The current CEO of Hart Legacy Holdings, a man named Mr. Sterling, stood up. He had been silent until now. Mr. Hart has been suspended pending the investigation into corporate malfeasance, Sterling said. His voting rights have been frozen. Today's meeting is to acknowledge the new majority shareholders and to vote on the future leadership of this company. Majority shareholders? Mark squeaked. But the trust is tied up in probate. The trust vested 48 hours ago, Marion said, due to the emergency clauses triggered by the assault on the primary trustee. Vanessa paled. I told you that was an accident. The law disagrees, Marion said, and because the trust has vested, the ownership of Hart Legacy Holdings has transferred to the beneficiaries named in Walter Hart's final instrument. Marion gestured to the screen at the front of the room. A pie chart appeared. It showed two massive blue sections, each representing 50%. The company is now owned, in equal measure, by Miss Amy Walsh and Miss Jade Morales. The room went silent. Vanessa frowned. She tilted her head, as if trying to decipher a foreign language. Who? She whispered. Jade Morales, Marion repeated. He pointed to the girl sitting next to me. Jade stopped tapping her boot. She stood up slowly. She leaned forward, placing her calloused hands flat on the polished wood of the table. She looked directly at Vanessa. Hello, Mother, Jade said. The color drained from Vanessa's face so fast it looked like she had been physically struck. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Her mouth opened and closed, like a fish on a dock. No, Vanessa gasped. That is impossible. Is it? Jade asked, her voice rough and scraping. Because I remember the fire station. I remember the itchy blanket you wrapped me in. I was 3. Vanessa, I remember your perfume. It smelled like gardenias. It still does. Vanessa looked at Mark, panic clawing at her throat. Mark, I don't know who this is. This is a scam. They hired an actor. She is not an actor. Ness, Mark whispered, staring at Jade with horror. She has your eyes. I do not have a daughter, Vanessa shrieked. I have Logan. Only Logan. Walter knew, Marion cut in, his voice cold. Walter found her. He tracked her through the foster system. He watched her grow up while you pretended she didn't exist, and he decided that the child you threw away was more worthy of his legacy than the woman who threw her. This is a lie, Vanessa screamed, slamming her hand on the table. Walter would never leave my money to a stranger. I demand to see the proof. You want proof? I asked. Marion, play the video. Marion pressed a button on the remote. The lights dimmed. On the massive screen, a grainy video appeared. It was Walter. He was sitting in his study, wearing his favorite plaid shirt. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. He was looking directly into the camera. If you are watching this, Walter's recorded voice rumbled, filling the room, then I am gone, and if you are watching this in a boardroom, it means Vanessa has tried to make a move. Vanessa made a choking sound. I built this company with 2 hands and a lot of sweat, Walter continued on the screen. I did not build it for greed, and I certainly did not build it for cruelty. I have watched my son, Mark, become a shadow of a man, controlled by a woman who values things more than people. Mark put his head in his hands. I cannot leave my life's work to them, Walter said. So I am leaving it to the survivors. Amy, you have a heart of gold, and you have a spine of steel that you haven't found yet. You will find it. Walter paused in the video, shifting in his chair. And to Jade, he said, the granddaughter I never got to meet. I am sorry I didn't come for you sooner. I was afraid she would hurt you if she knew where you were, but I'm giving you the means to fight back now. You and Amy, you are different, but you are the same. You are the ones she left behind, so I am leaving you everything. The video, Walter leaned into the camera lens. Vanessa, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. I know you are watching. I know you think you deserve this, but you don't. You are a hollow woman.
and I will not let my legacy fill your empty soul. It belongs to the girls."
The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. Vanessa was trembling. She looked small. The white suit didn't look like armor anymore. It looked like a surrender flag. He hated me," she whispered. "He saw you," I corrected. Mark stood up slowly. He looked at me, then at Jade, then at the CEO. "Amy," Mark said, his voice shaking. "Honey, look, I know mistakes were made. Vanessa." She gets intense. "But I am your father. I have run the finances of this company for 10 years. You need me. You two are young. You do not know how to manage a corporation. I can guide you. I can stay on as a consultant. Just do not cut me out. Please. I have a mortgage. Logan's tuition." I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had watched me scrub floors for years. The man who had watched his wife scream at me and done nothing. The man who had stood by while I bled on a rug because he was afraid of a scene.
"You want to stay?" I asked.
"I can help you," Mark pleaded. "We are family."
Jade laughed. It was a dark, terrifying sound.
"Family?" Jade stepped around the table, walking toward Mark. He shrank back. "You stood there and watched your wife push your daughter through a glass table. You watched her bleed. And your first instinct wasn't to call an ambulance. It was to cover it up."
"I was in shock," Mark stammered.
"You are a coward," Jade spat. "And I do not hire cowards." Jade turned to me. "I move to terminate Mark Hart from all positions within Hart Legacy Holdings, effective immediately, with cause." "I second the motion," I said, my voice steady. "The motion carries," Sterling said from the head of the table. "Mark, surrender your badge and your company phone. Security will escort you out." "You cannot do this," Vanessa screamed. "We have rights. I will sue you. I will drag this company into the ground." Marion stepped forward, holding a document. "Actually, Mrs. Hart, you won't," he said. "Because of the assault charge, Article 9, the scorched earth clause, by causing physical harm to a trustee, you have forfeited any claim, direct or indirect, to the estate. If you sue, the trust automatically countersues for the full value of the medical bills, pain and suffering, and punitive damages, and since you have no assets left, well, you do the math." Vanessa froze. Her eyes widened as the realization hit her. It wasn't just the signature. It wasn't just the secret daughter. It was her own violence. If she had just taken the rejection, if she hadn't shoved me, she might have been able to fight it in court. She might have gotten a settlement. But because she had to hurt me, because she had to punish me, she had destroyed her own lifeline. "You did this to yourself," I said, standing up. I walked over to her. I stood close enough that I could smell the gardenia perfume Jade had remembered. It didn't smell like luxury anymore. It smelled like desperation. "You thought the signature was the key," I told her quietly. "You thought if you forced me to sign, you would win. But that signature was never mine alone. It belonged to us, the two people you thought were garbage." I pointed to the door.
"Get out."
Vanessa looked at me. She looked at Jade, the daughter she had abandoned, who was now glaring at her with crossed arms and $12 million in her pocket. She looked at Mark, who was sobbing quietly into his hands. She had nothing. She turned and walked out. She didn't strut. She shuffled. She looked 20 years older than she had when she walked in. Mark followed her, escorted by 2 security guards. He didn't look back. When the doors closed, the room felt light. The air pressure equalized. "Well," Jade said, exhaling a long breath. That was satisfying. "Is it done?" I asked Marion. "It is done," Marion said, smiling. "The transfer is complete. The accounts are yours." Jade and I walked out of the building together. We took the elevator down to the lobby and stepped out into the bright, blinding sunshine of the city street. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the bank app. Deposit received. $12,700,000. I showed the screen to Jade. She pulled out her own cracked smartphone. She had the same notification. We stood there on the sidewalk, the noise of the city rushing around us. 2 girls who had been invisible, 2 girls who had been hurt. Jade looked at the number, then she looked at me. She reached out and, for the very first time, she took my hand. Her grip was rough and strong. "So," Jade said, a grin spreading across her face, "you want to go buy a dealership? Or maybe just a really expensive lunch?"
"Lunch first," I said, squeezing her hand back. "Then we rewrite the rest." We walked down the street, our shoulders touching. Vanessa Hart had wanted a legacy. She had wanted a dynasty. She got one.
But it wasn't the one she expected. The legacy didn't belong to the woman who demanded it. It belonged to the daughters who survived her. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment your location below. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.